They are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. We today can also experience the transforming power of the Word of God. If we lack wisdom, if we need encouragement and refreshing for our souls, if we need guidance on this journey, we can find it in reading the Word of God. In what? Reading the Word of God. David goes into prayer after extolling the virtues of the Word of God. He prayed. But who can discern their own errors? Forgive my hidden faults. Keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, innocent of great transgression. May these words of my mouth and this meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, Lord, my rock and my redeemer, from the NIV version. Now, Heavenly Father, we be thou present, O God of wisdom, and direct the counsels of this honorable House of Assembly. Enable them to settle things on the best and surest foundation. Preserve the health of their temporal bodies and vigor of their minds. Shower down on them and the thousands they here represent such temporal blessings as thou seest expedient for them in this world, and crown them with everlasting glory in the world to come. All this we ask in the name and through the merits of Jesus Christ, the Son and our Savior, who taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. We forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not in temptation. Deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. When the business of the House suspended on yesterday evening, the member for Freetown had reserved the floor. But just before we begin, the member for Central Grand Bahama has a special person in the gallery this morning, and the chair has acceded to the Central Grand Bahama to indicate who that special person is and the special occasion for which that person is here.
Special days and events away from our families and loved ones on behalf of the people. And today was one of those days when I was almost to the point of missing Parliament because of a very special occasion. However, the person on whose behalf I'm speaking reminded me that I was elected by the people to work for the people, and I should be present at all times. So instead of me being absent today, she is taking on the responsibility of flying to Nassau, even though she's afraid of flying, to be here with me today to ensure that I do not miss work. And on today, March 14th, she celebrates her birthday. So I would like for us as a parliament and on my behalf to wish my wife a very special happy birthday. And I will be selfish, and I hope you live to see and enjoy many more with me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oh, sorry. My wife, I'm so sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you, Anchorson. I believe you would have known her perhaps longer than I did. Her name is Heather Lewis. I would not miss that.
Mrs. Lewis, on behalf of all of the members of Parliament, we wish you a very, very happy birthday and trust that you all will enjoy the remainder of the evening as you celebrate. Honorable members, just before we begin, I had the opportunity to read the newspaper this morning, and I thought that this opinion in the Nassau Guardian was very instructive and informative, and I just wanted to adopt the final paragraph of this opinion by a former member in this place, Chicago Line, where he indicated that perhaps this new administration will change that pattern, and he is referring to a pattern with respect to the Bahamas being blacklisted and his experience during the 2000 blacklisting, that will change that pattern, creating an enduring institution for international engagement on matters of policy and regulation, and engage a cadre of trained, capable, and committed professionals to keep the gate so that we don't suffer these negative listings for lack of vigilance, readiness, and execution. And he said that this is his genuine hope. I only wish to add to that from my devotions this morning. The Bible says in Proverbs 22:7, the borrower is slave to the lender. The borrower is slave to the lender. Now that's a very pregnant statement. That can give deliveries to a whole lot of things. And further on in Proverbs, in the 28th chapter, verse 19, it says, those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who follow it after strangers and vain persons shall have poverty enough. I was reminded by a statement from the late Father Thompson. Father Thompson always said to me, the Bahamas has had a revolution. It was a bloodless revolution, moving from minority to majority rule. But now the Bahamas needs to move from commercial charity to social and economic justice. That's another very pregnant statement by the late Father Thompson. And so as we proceed, I would like for us all in here to be guided by those proverbs and the remarks of the late Father Thompson from the St. Agnes Anglican Church. And with those words, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I enjoyed your comments on the unfortunate blacklisting of our nation, and it makes me feel good, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister of Finance is striving and making his endeavor best to correct this unfortunate situation. But what makes me feel even better, Mr. Speaker, and demonstrates the political maturity of this country is the member for Exuma and Ragged Island stating categorically in the newspaper, the Shadow Minister of Finance, stating categorically in the newspaper his standing solidarity with the government in trying to reverse this unfortunate circumstance. It seems as if, Mr. Speaker, our country is under attack, and it always bodes well when we as citizens stand and come together, especially in this place, to fight the forces that are trying to undermine us. So with that segue, Mr. Speaker, it's always a distinct pleasure to rise in this House on behalf of the wonderful people of Freetown.
Well done, Exuma. Well done.
Mr. Speaker, I am 10 months into this new job of representing approximately 9,000 of my fellow Bahamians, and I have to admit, it is indeed the most awesome responsibility I've ever had. Mr. Speaker, I've done much in my constituency over the past 10 months, and I will elaborate more on that in my budget contribution address 3 months from now. But there is one program of which I am particularly proud, and one which requires mention now and again in 3 months. Every Wednesday, shortly after 3 p.m., my dear wife Saskia and her team from the Diagla Art Foundation go to the Uriah McPhee Primary School on Kemp Road in the heart of Freetown. Once there, they set up and conduct an after-school arts and crafts class. Any kid that wants to come can come. Mr. Speaker, the class started off small, but once the word got around about how much fun it was, the class quickly grew to almost 50 kids. Mr. Speaker, the kids have a blast, creating stuff, drawing stuff, painting stuff, and for 75 minutes, once a week, their minds are allowed to abandon the rigidity of the school curriculum and explore the creative side of their intellect. Mr. Speaker, when the going gets tough and I get consumed with the pressures of this job, I think of those 50 or so kids to whom I am fortunate enough to provide this after-school program. And I start to dream of the creativity I am unleashing in their young minds and the amazing potential it may create. Yes. Mr. Speaker, it is programs like this that make this job so awesome. And it's for this reason that I thank once again the great people of Freetown for entrusting me with the incredible responsibility of representing them in the halls of Parliament. But before I proceed this morning, let me address the comment that I have heard over and over and over again by my good friend, the Member of Parliament for Exuma and Ragged Island. He keeps harping on the fact that this government has no plan to stimulate economic activity. Really? Does he really think that this government is not focused like a laser on the economy? I know we've been talking night and day about all the foolishness that went on in the halls of government when his party was in power. But believe me when I say that meetings after meetings have been taking place with captains of industry to come up with plans to improve the ease of doing business, reduce the cost of power, fix the problems with the dump, facilitate inward investment, revitalize the over-the-hill area. revitalize Bay Street,
Yes.
and continue to improve our tourism infrastructure.
Yes.
I want every Bahamian to believe that growing the economy and providing employment opportunities for as many Bahamians as possible is the #1 focus of my ministry and this entire government. And I am very confident that when history looks back on the first 5 years of the minister's administration, it will be remembered as a period of substantial economic growth. Mr. Speaker, the PLP wants us to focus on the future for 2 reasons. First, I agree, it is what we should be doing, and what, in fact, when you hear the contributions of my fellow ministers, it is exactly what we are doing. But the second reason why they want us to focus on the future is because it is so painful to focus on the past. Mr. Speaker, as I have sat here and listened to minister after minister and MP after MP recount the horror stories of the fiscal irresponsibility exercised time and time again by the former PLP government, I too, if I were them, would want to encourage us to move on. From the fiscally irresponsible decisions at BPL and Water and Sewage, BAMSI, Junkanoo Carnival, BAIC, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Works, to the endless large contracts given out to friends and supporters without any bids or transparent process being deployed, to the hiring of thousands of Bahamians in the public service just before the election, to the bonuses and raises and promotions, all given out days before May the 10th, 2017. Mr. Speaker, it truly sickens me and countless Bahamians how fiscally irresponsible the PLP really were. And of course, all of this fiscal responsibility, coupled with a lack of ideas to stimulate the same economic growth that the member for Exuma and Ragged Island wants us now to produce, and we will, led to the 4 downgrades in 5 years. Mr. Speaker, the state-owned company that troubles me the most is the Bank of the Bahamas, for which the government has just had to borrow $100 million to cover the loans of the politically connected that were never repaid. It makes me sick, Mr. Speaker, that my taxes were used to repay the Bank of the Bahamas for loans totaling, in one instance, $28 million. Mr. Speaker, I wasn't...
Honourable member, there's a point of order. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Cat Island, Rampion, San Salvador.
The member makes an assertion that the $100 million is being used to pay off some politically connected loans that were advanced by the Bank of the Bahamas. He's brought no evidence to support that contention. Unless he's able to do so, perhaps he ought not to be allowed that to remain on the record. Otherwise, he ought to do so, and at the same time, he ought to be able to demonstrate under whose watch those loans were made.
Resolve was created under the PLP.
Honourable member for
We know what.
Honourable member for Freetown.
We know why Resolve was created. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I was in business for 26 years in this country, and I never owed any bank more than $2 million. Mr. Speaker, who in their right mind makes loans of these sizes? Speak to anyone in the business community.
Honourable member. Honourable member. The point of order. Are you suggesting, or did you suggest that the $100 million were borrowed to pay off politically connected loans? Is that the position?
No.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Speaker. I've heard with the member for Cat Island, and he's a very clever litigator, and I'm not a litigator. I'm just a simple businessman, so I'm always guided by his advice. Yes, simple, very simple. I just take in revenue and I pay out expenses, and I'm left with something hopefully at the end of the day. So I am guided by his advice. If he thinks that that I am implying that these loans were for politically corrected reasons, then I withdraw that statement. I will stand corrected. I'll let the Bahamian people decide what they think the loans were for, and if he wants me to withdraw it, I will withdraw it and let the Bahamian people make their comments.
That's good litigation right there. That's all there. Good litigation.
That being the fact, Mr. Speaker, it makes me sick to my stomach that we have had to bail out this bank, to spend $100 million to bail it out. Now, I'll let the Bahamian people make their decision on what it's for. And I will always recommend to the Minister of Finance that the government should seek to divest itself of its interest in Bank of the Bahamas. It makes no sense for us to bail this bank time and time again, for us to be back here at a later time should someone else get in office.
Run it like a business.
I've heard the member for Engliston, my good friend, run on and on about how that was a PLP idea and how well it has proven in raising money for the government of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I supported the introduction of VAT because we had to do something to get a handle on the government's runaway annual deficits. The government, I guess, have cut spending, but that would have made a bad economy worse. Mr. Speaker, I was a member of the Coalition for Responsible Taxation, which was the private sector entity that, at its own expense, performed the studies to prove that the current rate of VAT, 7.5%, with no exemptions, absolutely no exemptions, was the best, most productive, most efficient VAT strategy to utilize. I was there, Mr. Speaker, sitting across from former Prime Minister Christie as he contemplated an initial VAT rate of 15% with many, many exemptions. And it was the CRT that convinced him through detailed statistical research to keep it simple stupid, with a low rate and no exemptions. We actually suggested 6%, but settled for 7.5%. Thank God former Prime Minister Christie had the sense to listen to the CRT. Where he did not listen to the CRT was when we said over and over again, with the introduction of VAT, it had to go hand in hand with a Fiscal Responsibility Act, i.e., whatever new taxes you realize from VAT, it had to be used for only specific purposes, like reducing the deficit or the national debt. We warned that if the introduction of VAT was not accompanied with a Fiscal Responsibility Act, there would be unprecedented spending, and we would be right back where we started with runaway deficits and rising debt. Well, guess what, Mr. Speaker? The former PLP government took the CRT support for the introduction of the VAT as a green light to roll out the new tax, but when we started asking about the accompanying fiscal responsibility legislation, we were met with the Christie shuffle. Mr. Speaker, I've never seen so much outright ducking and weaving in all my life. Oh, we can't have a Fiscal Responsibility Act. What happens if a hurricane comes? It will happen to government's ability to react. Trust us, we can use the people's money responsibly. Ha! Just as we predicted, the most sustained, irresponsible spending spree ensued, and we have nothing, absolutely nothing to show for it, except huge deficits, a litany of tales of downright dishonesty with the people's money, and a faster growing national debt. Mr. Speaker, I had to get that off my chest because it was just upsetting me for a while. So I will now turn to my portfolios of tourism, aviation, and Bahamas Air. Let me begin with tourism. Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to report that our tourism sector is hot. Everywhere I go, hotels are full, restaurants are busy, and those in the tour business are stating that there is a renewed interest in this destination. But rather than tell you what I feel,
God is good.
let me give you the facts.
God is good.
Man, relax yourself.
God is good.
Mr. Speaker, in 2017, hot. Mr. Speaker, that's the word for today. Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, the Bahamas received 6.14 million visitors. In 2016, the previous year, the Bahamas received 6.27 million visitors. Therefore, the Bahamas received 129,000 less visitors in 2017 when compared to 2016, a decline of 2.1%. This decline is attributed to the devastation caused by Hurricane Matthew in 2016 and to a lesser extent, Hurricane Joaquin, both of which resulted in significant impacts, I tell you the truth, to hotel product on multiple islands and temporary closures to hotels in major tourism centers such as Nassau, Paradise Island, Bimini, and Grand Bahama, creating a negative ripple effect in foreign and sea arrivals well into 2017. The industry had further setbacks from Hurricane Irma last year, which devastated the southern islands of Ragged Island, Inagua, Mayaguana, Acklins, and Crooked Island. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, 22% of our foreign visitors came by air, the stopover visitors, and 78% came by cruise ship. Naturally, we prefer the stopover visitors because they spend about 20 times more in the local economy than a cruise passenger. But sadly, the stopover visitors to the Bahamas decreased by 56,000 or 4% in 2017. That entire decline can be attributed to the continued closure of the Lukaya property in Freeport, since the number of stopover visitors to Grand Bahama Island declined from 126,000 in 2016 to 71,000 in 2017. Air arrivals into Nassau decreased by 36,000 or 3.6% in 2017, but that was caused by reduced room inventory when the Coral Towers at Atlantis was closed for almost the entire year for a complete renovation, as was the Riu, also on Paradise Island. In fact, a number of properties have decided to upgrade their offerings in anticipation of the coming on stream of the brand new Bahama product. The good news is that the Family Islands enjoyed robust growth in tourist arrivals in 2017. In fact, Family Islands have grown consistently since 2009. Worthy of mention was Abaco, which saw its tourist arrivals increase by 10.4% in 2017, from 94,000 to 104,000, with the Marsh Harbor Airport surpassing the Freeport Airport to become the second busiest airport in the Commonwealth. Also worthy of mention is Exuma, which saw its tourist arrivals increase by 21.7% from 50,000 to 61,000, and Eleuthera, which saw its tourist arrivals increase by 24.4% from 39,000 to 49,000.
Hot, hot, hot.
The growth in arrivals into the Family Islands is due in part to the very high repeat visitor rate enjoyed by the Family Islands of approximately 66%. This high repeat visitor rate to the Family Islands is anchored by second homeowners who are extremely loyal to their destination. 250,000 foreign visitors flew into the Family Islands in 2016. 285,000 flew into the Family Islands in 2017. And Mr. Speaker, we're expecting the number of foreign visitors flying into the Family Islands to exceed 300,000 for the very first time in the history of this country in 2018. Sea arrivals produced 4.8 million visitors in 2017, down 1.5% from the 4.87 million that came by sea in 2016. You will note that I place less emphasis on the sea arrivals because despite the enormity of the number, 78% of our total visitors come by ship, the spending of our cruise passengers only represents 11% of the total spending by visitors in our country. 78% spend 11% of the money. 22% spend 89% of our money. So we must stay focused on the stopover visitors, and converting as many of our cruise passengers to stopover visitors must remain a priority. So, Mr. Speaker, I've talked about what happened to our tourist arrivals in 2017, and now it is time to turn to 2018. Mr. Speaker, in the first month of this year, air arrivals to the Bahamas were up by a whopping 7%, and sea arrivals were up by a respectable 4.6%. Even in Grand Bahama, there was some good news. Air arrivals were down 18%, but the destination experienced a 44% increase in overall arrivals with the return of the Royal Caribbean Cruise Service to the island. But it was Nassau Paradise Island that led the way with a 7.9% increase in air arrivals in January 2018, primarily caused by the coming on stream of the Bahama property. Mr. Speaker, I am particularly delighted how well the 1,800-room Grand Hyatt and the 300-room SLS are performing at Bahama, and I'm eagerly awaiting the opening of the 200-room Rosewood in May 2017. As I speak to visitors at the property, they are impressed with the quality of the facilities, but more importantly, they are impressed with the quality of the service, and this is most encouraging. Over 4,000 Bahamians are employed at that property, and that number is soon to rise to 5,000. And given my past connection with that property, serving on the board of directors of Bahama in a former life, I'm overjoyed to see the property finally performing as it was originally intended to perform.
Hot, hot, hot.
The member for Exuma and the member for Angliston, and I've even heard the chairman of the PLP, all falling over themselves to say over and over again that Bahama is a PLP project. That assertion is laughable, since I am sure that the PLP had no input in the design and layout of the property, invested no money into the deal, and were instrumental in doing nothing more than meddle in a commercial dispute that ended up delaying the project by almost 3 years and costing the Bahamian economy some $5 billion in lost economic activity. And to add insult to injury, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, hold on. I said I was on the board. And to add insult to injury, listen to this now, it's important. And to add insult to injury, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you how petty and small-minded the PLP can be.
Take your time.
In the run-up to the general election, the PLP had some event in the Convention Center at Bahama, and the room they intended to use for this event was called the Diagla Ballroom, named after my father, the late great Vincent Diagla, for his contribution to the arts and his unending support of Bahamian artists. Well, with me being F&M, and they being petty, small-minded PLPs, they took my father's name down off that ballroom just before their event started and gave it some generic name like the Lukaya Ballroom. That hurt my mother. That hurt my mother, Mr. Speaker. So much so, she absolutely refuses to this day to set foot in any of the Bahama properties as a protest to the mean-spirited act by the PLP.
We won't do that to you.
Point of order. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Angliston.
Thank you, Speaker. The member very appropriately acknowledged his own personal interests in the former owners of Bahama, and I think that has to be very clear and factored into his comments. But he just stated to the Bahamian people that we're seeking, the former government is seeking to take credit for a private project, which he said is ludicrous. But yet he's now saying in the same breath that the government had some hand in or some control in changing the name of a room at the hotel. The member should be consistent in his logic or his lack of logic and withdraw that comment, because the government has no input in what happens at that hotel in terms of the operations of the hotel, Mr. Speaker. And I'm asking the member if he would withdraw that, because he's saying the PLP is petty and small because they took his daddy name off the building, off the room, Speaker.
I'm not withdrawing it. But God moves in mysterious ways, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
I'm not withdrawing it.
Speaker.
You took the name down. I mean, the name came down.
Mr. Speaker, I'm asking for the member. The member is attributing to a sovereign government to take responsibility for the name coming off a room in a hotel, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. If you want to believe that the name didn't come down because I was F&M and they were PLP, then I will draw that. But I'll let the Bahamian people decide.
Yeah, let them decide. As you make the case, Speaker, that.
All I know is the name came down.
Make the case.
But God moves in mysterious ways, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister appointed me Minister of Tourism. And all that tremendous success that property will bring to the Bahamas will happen under my watch.
Robert got the gun.
And no matter what Exuma and Angliston and the former MP for Fox Hill can or ever say about how PLP this project is, I want them always to remember that it was under Denisio Diagla, the member for Freetown, and the FMN that this project commenced its operations and enjoyed the success that it will almost certainly achieve.
The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member Fangerson on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. The member for Freetown has drawn me into his debate repeatedly, and he has asserted that I said that the Bahama project is a PLP project. Speaker, what I did say, and I want the member to, and he's misrepresenting what I said in this House. What I said was that during a very sensitive time of negotiations, when the project was in bankruptcy, that this government, then in opposition, did everything they could to undermine that project. But when the government changed, they turned around and said it was so critical to the well-being of our people. I sought to highlight the contradiction in what they had advanced in opposition and to what they are doing in government. And I use that word, contradiction. I never said it's PLP or FNM. I said we have a government that is not being consistent and that was reckless and dangerous in their comments before the general election as it relates to that project, Mr. Speaker. So I want the member to get it correct. Don't get me mixed up, please.
Mr. Speaker, obviously when you're opposing or trying to influence an income, you can oppose it. But once you are dealt the hand, we were dealt the hand. So we had to deal with it. And that's why you may think there's a contradiction, but it is what it is. Mr. Speaker, the real news, however, is that this year, the tourism industry in the Bahamas appears to be firmly turning a corner after a decade of sluggish performance and marginal growth. The recent upswing in business from stopover markets appears to be the result of, one, rising incomes and consumer demand from our primary U.S. markets, two, increased hotel and vacation rental inventory, three, improved airlift seat capacity, and four, prolonged bad weather in the USA. Notwithstanding the impacts of future hurricanes, sustainable upward trajectory will largely depend on the ministry's success in deploying strategies to increase the cruise visitor spend through an improved experience at our cruise port, foster innovation through new business development and entrepreneurship so that we can strengthen linkages between our tourism industry and local businesses. Three, strengthen airlift capacity, visibility, and competitiveness to support industry growth. Four, enhance Family Island airport infrastructure. Five, increase sales, public relations, brand and partner marketing in our source markets to improve market share. Six, attract more foreign direct investment to effect a turnaround in the fortunes of Grand Bahama. Seven, encourage more uniformity in hotel performance throughout our islands. And eight, establish a robust and modern policy and regulatory framework to strengthen all sectors of the industry. Mr. Speaker, since almost all of the hotel inventory in the country caters to high-quality, high-value business, my ministry has focused its priorities on attracting this high-quality, high-value business rather than high-volume, low-value business. Mr. Speaker, we are not the Dominican Republic, Cuba, or Jamaica,
Keep comparing.
who are all experiencing double-digit growth in stopover arrivals generated by high-volume, low-value business from tourists who more often than not avail themselves of the all-inclusive product. We are focused primarily on the high-quality, high-value business from visitors who more often than not avail themselves of the exceptional products offered by Atlantis, Bahama, and the Four Seasons. And as such, they are prepared to pay far more than the all-inclusive customer to experience these superior products. The Ministry of Tourism will work with our industry partners to improve the variety and quality of service offerings, activities, entertainment, signature events, and family-friendly offerings to keep the Bahamas adaptable to help maintain its competitive edge in the global marketplace. Mr. Speaker, of critical importance is the need to address the need for more funding for overseas marketing and sales. Compared to the competition, like Aruba, we are woefully underfunded, primarily because too much of our marketing dollars was siphoned off for non-marketing related activities touted and supported by meddling politicians, inevitably to create jobs domestically and endear themselves to the electorate at the expense of our economic well-being. The Ministry of Tourism's budget should be right-sized in light of tourism's contribution to the national economy, with better funding for destination marketing and product development programs, as doing so will facilitate better returns for the country. Mr. Speaker, I feel compelled from time to time to ensure my colleagues are ever mindful about why we are in the tourism business. We have this God-given gift of being located in the most beautiful part of the world with incredible people and natural resources.
Yes.
But as the most tourism-dependent region in the world, the bottom line is that we are in the tourism business to generate jobs, stimulate economic activity, earn foreign exchange, and generate tax revenue to enable us to build schools, roads, airports, seaports, parks and infrastructure, look out for the health, safety, and welfare of our people, and build a better quality of life. We must never forget that. I listened carefully to the Minister of Finance's very thorough outline of revenues at mid-year and noted that of the $880.7 million in revenue collected at the mid-year mark, tourism taxes accounted for only $59.5 million, or 6.8%, which the DPM noted was 41.1% of the full-year forecast. So tourism taxes are expected to deliver a paltry $144.8 million of the country's $2.15 billion annual budget by the end of the fiscal year. We might know that this accounting leads to a misperception of the value of tourism, but I will wager that the ordinary man on the street and many of the staff within the Ministry of Finance and other parts of the government see tourism as a very small contributor to the Treasury. Unless this misperception is addressed, I fear the rightful view of tourism as our primary economic development tool and regard for the Ministry of Tourism as our principal agent for accelerated economic development will be much diminished. The Ministry of Tourism paid for the collection of data by the Department of Statistics to enable the establishment of the UNWTO, United Nations World Tourism Organization, Tourism Satellite Account. Tourism paid for the exercise so that it could be done on an ongoing basis by an independent agency so that tourism could not be accused of cooking the books. My memory is correct. The last TSA, conducted in 2007, showed that tourism, direct, indirect, and induced transactions accounted for 51% of the taxes collected by the Treasury. Applied to the member for East Grand Bahama's analysis, tourism taxes would have accounted for $440 million, not the paltry $59.5 million of revenues collected at mid-year. We suspect that with the introduction of VAT, the percentage of tourism, the percentage contribution of tourism to the Treasury will have increased. The worst estimate of the value of tourism to our GDP is 60%. In an efficient economy and with an efficient application of taxes, tourism should account for 60% of our tax collection. So why are the revenue estimates for tourism so low? As I mentioned in an earlier note, tourism tax in the finance estimates include only departure tax, hotel guest tax, and boating fees. It does not take into account taxes on imports consumed by visitors, taxes paid on fuel by taxi drivers, VAT paid by hotel workers, taxi drivers, hair braiders, shopkeepers, straw vendors, who receive 100% of their income, in most cases, from visitors. Nor does it include the taxes paid by companies and their staff, such as Pinder's Customs Brokerage, Odyssey, real estate brokers, who receive a substantial portion of their income from the tourism sector. When the television program Tourism Today was established, it was intended to tell Bahamians what they need to know to make tourism better. And it was supposed to be a vehicle to sensitize the general public, the civil servants, and the decision makers of the importance of tourism to our local economy. The simple fact is that we need to accelerate the contribution that tourism can make to our economy. But tourism will not be provided with the kind of attention and assets if it is misperceived as a very small contributor to our economic development. The simple fact is this: if our accommodations are only 60% full, if we move their occupancy to 90% full, tourism can contribute another $645 million annually without adding a single new asset. If 90% is impossible, we have to explain why some cruise lines run 100% year-round to Nassau. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to tourism's marketing plan, here we go, Exuma, my ministry has been working diligently to ensure that the Bahamas remains top of mind with new and existing customers, capitalizing on the unique attributes that differentiate the island of the Bahamas from our core competitors. Exuma, I need you to focus even harder now, since I'm about to delve even deeper into the nuts and bolts of my plan for economic growth. The primary objective of our marketing efforts is to ultimately increase stopover visitor arrivals and consumers with high discretionary income who can spend more and stay longer. My ministry has made a shift in strategy as we work aggressively towards evolving into a streamlined digital and social media marketing force. Our marketing strategy is research and data-driven, highly targeted, agile, consistent, and effective. The action plan to achieve this redirected strategy and to power our 16-island brand proposition included the engagement of the New York-based, well-known public relations company Weber Shandwick Worldwide and the engagement of the innovative, cutting-edge, extremely creative advertising company Tambourine. The plan also includes greater collaboration with private sector partners such as the Nassau Paradise Island Promotion Board to minimize duplication of effort and to maximize efficiency for greater returns on investment. Mr. Speaker, it is of paramount importance to get ahead of our booking numbers. As such, my ministry now utilizes the forecasting platform Forward Keys, which tells us on any given day how many people are in possession of a paid airline ticket to the Bahamas, from which city they will be flying, and on which day, up to 6 months in the future, they will be arriving. We also use future booking reports from our airline partners and from Expedia, which has now grown to the largest producer of online bookings to the islands of the Bahamas. My ministry is using this data to determine the projections of when and how many people are coming to the Bahamas and thereby drive cutting-edge media campaigns in response to bookings, peaks, and valleys. Mr. Speaker, some of the current marketing goals for the Bahamas include clarifying and enhancing the Bahamas' brand message across all channels, amplifying and solidifying the destination's 16-island marketing strategy, expanding the creation of authentically Bahamian content, as well as introducing the Latin American markets to the destination with inspirational and tactical ad campaigns. I am confident that my ministry is headed in the right direction. After months of stories overwhelmingly focused on the devastation of the Caribbean caused by Hurricanes Irma and Maria, my ministry created our own editorial content, providing up-to-date information to travelers destined for the Bahamas, as well as digital channels and audience targeting to reach consumers directly, like Donald Trump. Mr. Speaker, instead of being inundated by Caribbean devastation stories, the Bahamas was declared one of the top places to travel in 2018 by Condé Nast Traveler, the Huffington Post, and Travel and Leisure, among other publications. New tourism data showed an uptick in international arrivals to the Bahamas. Using the new digital tool, Forward Keys, to track business results, the Ministry of Tourism has found that after months of lagging international visitor arrivals to the Bahamas when compared to 2016, there was a striking reverse in the trend, with October representing a significant change of direction. According to the Forward Keys reports, international arrivals to the Bahamas in October 27 grew after the results of 2016 were hampered by Hurricane Matthew. The growth in bookings from selected designated marketing areas globally has resulted in a bright booking situation from November 2017 to July 2018, forecasting double-digit increases in select markets compared to the same period last year. Mr. Speaker, a robust co-op marketing campaign with Expedia, the largest producer of online bookings for the islands of the Bahamas, yielded 263,000 air tickets, an increase of 14.7% year over year, and 250,000 room nights, a 9% increase year over year, 2016 versus 2017. Expedia bookings for January and February of this year are producing a return on ad spend of $80 to $1 with over 3.1 million in gross revenue bookings to the destination so far in 2 short months. According to our latest Expedia booking report for the past 4 weeks, hotel revenue and bookings are up double digits for Nassau Paradise Island, the Out Islands, and Grand Bahama Island. Additional media campaigns continue with digital partners like TripAdvisor, social media juggernaut Beautiful Destinations, Facebook, Adara, Instagram, Google, and Bing, to name a few. I'm pleased to announce that my ministry will, this year, launch a new brand campaign for the first time since 2013. The media rollout will include TV, out-of-home, digital, and social media channels. Also, our first virtual reality 360 shoot is scheduled for next month, which will arm our sales and marketing teams globally with new tools to showcase the beauty of the Bahamas via a visually immersive experience. Since August 2017, my ministry has hosted over 28 writers, bloggers, and social media influencers who wrote and posted about experiences from Nassau to Mayaguana. These writers are bringing to consumers their experiences of Junkanoo, people to people in Nassau, fishing in Andros, off the beaten path adventure in Mayaguana, and the new hotel development here in the capital and in Harbor Island and Eleuthera. We reached an even larger audience by co-sponsoring the production of the daytime entertainment show Live with Kelly and Ryan in early February. Live showcased the Bahamas to their audience across 4 programs produced from Atlantis Island and Exuma. These shows reached an audience of 15,560,000 viewers with an ad value of 16 million. We didn't pay that. Wow. Most importantly, inquiries into travel to the Bahamas spiked as soon as the show began to air. I'm now happy to report that the Bahamas has received numerous awards, including the World Travel Award for Leading Luxury Destination. Wow. Will cause me to choke now. The International Association of Golf Tour Operators named the islands of the Bahamas the Golf Destination of the Year for Latin America and the Caribbean. Winners are selected based on the breadth and quality of golf coverings, including customer satisfaction, quality golf courses and resorts, and level of support from local tourism boards and industry partners. Bahamas.com won the Interactive Media Awards Best in Class category in the category of travel and tourism, which is the highest honor bestowed by the Interactive Media Awards. It represents the very best in planning and execution. My ministry now relies heavily on analytics to drive smart, data-driven decision-making. To assist with this, we have established a dynamic digital dashboard to see real-time statistics like traffic to Bahamas.com and engagement on all social media channels. Our numbers are trending in the right direction, such as significant increases in unique visitors and page views on Bahamas.com. Mr. Speaker, my ministry continues to improve upon Bahamas.com by enhancing the ability for visitors to search for places to stay in the Bahamas, which is extremely important to the hotel sector. We've also expanded individual property listings with larger imagery, videos, a map, relevant activities, and TripAdvisor reviews. Our dashboard also measures website visitors' clicks on deals to book, as well as converting those clicks to hot leads for hotel properties. My ministry recently added a commission-free hotel booking direct engine on Bahamas.com, powered by a company called Jackrabbit. For the period December 1, 2017 to February the 28th, 2018, the Book Now links from the individual hotels listed on Bahamas.com generated 5,040 leads directly to hotel partners. Our independent analytics provider, Hitwise, reports that the Bahamas dominates approximately 34 to 37% of the online digital share of voice within our competitive set. We constantly battle for the #1 spot with Aruba, which has a significantly larger marketing budget than we do. Mr. Speaker, the Chinese market today is the fastest growing demographic in the world, and my ministry has launched a new advertising and marketing tool that will focus on building awareness and encouraging more travel from the Chinese market by developing our own Bahamas account on what is known as the WeChat mobile application. The WeChat platform has 889 million monthly users, and it combines applications like Facebook, WhatsApp, Uber, Apple Pay, Messenger, Grubhub, Amazon, etc., all in one. My ministry continues to leverage the power of social media marketing by curating and posting inspirational, authentic content in the form of photos, videos, and blogs across the most relevant social media channels. This has increased engagement and grown audiences on all Bahamas social channels. Mr. Speaker, ahead of the new fiscal, my ministry will continue to strengthen our brand quality, harvest crucial data to help inform strategy for reaching target audience with the right messages and amplifying their messages to continue to attract visitors to the island of Bahamas, utilizing search engine marketing, new media, and email marketing. These efforts and our ongoing programs are setting us on path to a much stronger year for tourism in 2018. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Transport and I recently attended the Sea Trade Global Conference in Florida, where we met with the representatives of the cruise lines to discuss the government's plans for the revitalization of the Port of Nassau located at the Prince George Dock. Mr. Speaker, the plan of both myself and my cabinet colleague is to create an entity to manage the port in much the same way that NAD manages LPIA. The current setup of tourism managing the customer experience silo and transport managing the maritime infrastructure silo is woefully inefficient and leads to an operating scenario that is lacking in cohesiveness and effectiveness. Also, neither tourism nor transport is aware of what the other is spending on its operations at the port, and so there is no clue what to charge the cruise passenger who use both tourism and transport services, and as a consequence, government is unaware whether it's making money or losing money on its valuable asset. Mr. Speaker, we are also reviewing incentive legislation to forge a new and more equitable partnership with the cruise lines, because Lord knows that the deals cut by my predecessor have been one-sided in the favor of the cruise companies. Oh, Lord.
I'm assuming, sorry.
Chair, recognize the Honourable Member for Ingleston.
Mr. Speaker, I think I'm assuming that when the member, I wonder if he could clarify what he means by predecessor. If he's referring to the previous Free National Move administration, I have no objection. But if he is referring to the former Progressive Liberal Party administration, I will object. I wonder if he could clarify that, Mr. Speaker.
I was referring to your PLP.
I'm sorry. Speaker, in that case, then, Mr. Speaker, I will ask the member to, as he is, I believe, misleading this House, to indicate which initiative or plan or agreement has been setting back the Bahamian people. I'm wondering if he's speaking about when the cruise ships were allowed to keep their shops open in port, because that was under the previous Free National Movement. The casinos open in port, that was under the Free National Movement. Sale of keys for $1, that's the Free National Movement, Speaker.
Honourable Member.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
You're on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. The point of order is the member is misleading this House, and I'm asking him to indicate to this House what it was the Progressive Liberal Party government did in the last 5 years prior to this administration that has created, in his words, some sort of disproportionate relationship with the cruise industry, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I mean, I look at the incentives that we provide, the cruise companies for every person that comes through that port, and the large checks that we have to cut them month after month. And no. I saw the letter. It wasn't signed by. It was signed by your man. No. But that's all right. If you, I signed it.
Stay focused.
But Mr. Speaker, in order to, in the brevity of time, I withdraw it.
Stay focused.
You draw your own conclusions.
Stay focused.
We also aim to address the concerns of local agents of the cruise lines and government departments. Through re-established partnerships with local marinas, we aim to foster better private sector partnerships with our cruise and boating sectors to improve business delivery and achieve greater tourism expenditure. Mr. Speaker, I really reiterate that the ground continues to firm under the tourism industry, and clear evidence of this was apparent at the conference in Fort Lauderdale. The cruise sector is booming, since passenger numbers are growing annually by double-digit percentages, and every single boat is leaving port with 100% occupancy on every single vessel. Over 90 new state-of-the-art cruise ships are under construction right now to meet the public's insatiable demand for cruise travel. And the Bahamas remains a very important destination for the multitude of cruises that start from the largest cruise ports in the world, Miami and Fort Lauderdale. With 4.8 million cruise passenger visits last year, the Bahamas dominates this market, and although we continue to uphold our competitive position, we must improve the customer experience at the Port of Nassau if we wish to grow or even just maintain our market share. Airlift. Mr. Speaker, adequate airlift is one of the most important drivers of business to our destinations, and the Ministry of Tourism airlift strategies are focused on the growth of airlift capacity in alignment with our growing room inventory, with seats that are offered at the lowest possible fares to capitalize on our advantage of proximity. In the last quarter of 2017, the ministry welcomed its newest airline partner, Condor, from Frankfurt, Germany, and has repositioned resources to support and promote Bahamas Air's recent venture into the Houston market, new service from Southwest Airlines out of Florida, an incremental lift from our legacy partners Delta, Air Canada, Copa, and American Airlines. Additionally, the conclusion of 11 air service agreements with countries in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, as well as Australia and New Zealand, and the pending agreements with 10 more throughout Africa, the Middle East, and the Caribbean region will position the Lynden Pindling Airport as a global hub for international flights. Mr. Speaker, during the past 6 months, we have seen incremental increases in air seat capacity, as well as improved load factors to the major tourism centers of New Providence and Paradise Island, Abaco, Eleuthera, Exuma, and San Salvador, which is attributed to the surging demand in the marketplace and the yield performance of key airline partners. Primary U.S. markets are experiencing solid increases in both load and yield, particularly Fort Lauderdale, with the addition of daily service by Southwest Airlines, as well as Miami, London, Chicago, and Charlotte, all major hubs, which, along with their key connecting markets, show sustained seat capacity over the past year. The Canadian source markets of Toronto and Calgary and Montreal are also rebounding in 2018, with strong seat capacity increases to Nassau and Paradise Island, following the resurgence of the Canadian economy and a commitment to support of the destination by our Canadian airline partners. Latin America continues to show significant growth potential, delivering major nonstop service to New Providence from the Panama hub. Our joint sales and promotional efforts with Copa Airlines this year is beginning to reverse the recent trend of declining capacity to New York and Paradise Island. Mr. Speaker, our Euro market business continues to grow, with British Airways' addition of a 5th weekly flight from London Heathrow to Nassau using the 777 aircraft with more premium seats. They always say when the plane comes from London, when it comes to the Bahamas, it fills from the front to the back, not from the back to the front. So we're attracting the type of visitor that we need. This allows for connections. The British Airways flight allows for connections from the Middle East, Europe, and India, and targeting the lucrative meeting and incentive markets in the UK. Air Carib and Bahamas Air have signed an agreement that allows potential visitors from France and connecting cities in Europe to fly from Paris to Nassau via San Salvador. And talks are underway for a direct non-stop Paris-Nassau option. Airlift to the Family Island continues to reflect the Ministry of Tourism's strategy to exponentially increase market access to these islands by way of non-stop flights from key hubs, and the islands of Exuma, Abaco, Eleuthera, and San Salvador have been the beneficiaries of this strategy. Abaco traditionally has attracted non-stop flights from Atlanta and Miami and has experienced increased air seats from the Florida cities of Fort Lauderdale, Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa, and modest growth from West Palm Beach. Exuma's business has seen solid growth this year from hubs in Atlanta, Charlotte, Toronto, as well as Miami, and Fort Lauderdale from the addition of a non-stop Saturday-only service by American Airlines last June. North Eleuthera, seat capacity has grown strongly in 2018 from Atlanta and the Florida cities of Fort Lauderdale and Orlando, and more modestly from Miami, but from a much larger base, and San Salvador's seat capacity from Montreal and Miami have seen strong increases, although with modest annual declines from Paris. Bimini has seen significant increases this year compared to last, which has prompted an effort by the Ministry of Tourism to partner with Resorts World Bimini to stabilize airlift from Newark, New Jersey, and to increase seat capacity from Miami. Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, Grand Bahama's tourism industry, which lost 40% of its hotel inventory in 2016 with the advent of Hurricane Matthew, continues to languish. However, air seat capacity remains greater than expected in the circumstances, due mainly to the Ministry of Tourism's provisioning for scheduled non-stop service to support residents and future foreign direct investment to the island, and a firm commitment to the destination by our airline partners. Alpitour, which once again offer the Milan-Freeport flight for an additional 4 weeks in May, after a successful program in 2017, which brought much-needed business to Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, our airline partners are supported in their efforts by the Ministry of Tourism's brand marketing campaigns and tactical co-op marketing initiatives, which are tagged with our tour operators' call to action. Our sales teams have been aggressive in the current fiscal, fielding travel trade, promotional and themed events in the major hubs to inspire future travel to the Bahamas. We continue to engage and support top-tier retail travel agencies with various consumer and niche marketing activities and educational activities such as webinars, trade representations, lunch and learn seminars, in-destination familiarizations, and we have ramped up social media efforts, television and radio spot advertising, and co-op marketing with our airline and tour operator partners, and through digital displays, blogs, and online campaigns in targeted niche markets. In Latin America, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Tourism is working in close partnership with Copa Airlines to penetrate secondary markets and increase business from Latin America, and in conjunction with its lead marketing agency, Tambourine, initiated a major print and digital advertising and communications campaign dubbed Estoas Bahamas. This is Bahamas, creative on billboards, banners at select locations, and on information booths at shopping malls in Bogota. In addition to Colombia, we have also partnered with Copa Airlines and the Nassau Paradise Island Promotion Board in marketing efforts in Brazil, Panama, Chile, and Argentina to position Nassau as a preferred leisure destination using a combination of traditional and social media strategies and seminars with key wholesalers and travel agencies. Additionally, we will have a major presence at the World Travel Market Latin American Trade Show in Brazil next month, which draws over 15,000 industry movers and shakers and over 700 exhibitors, and at the La Cita Travel Show in Fort Lauderdale in September, which is by invitation only. We're going after the Latin American market because there's a large portion of their population that has a large disposable income, which we want to attract here. Europe. The Ministry of Tourism and its industry partners updated tour operators and media on post-hurricane conditions at the World Travel Market in London last November. I was there. And last week, led by the Director General and 14 Bahamas travel industry partners, updated operators and media at the International Travel Conference in Berlin, the world's largest travel trade show. Business from Europe has rebounded considerably, with Germany growing by double digits. The Ministry of Tourism recently implemented a branded campaign in partnership with the London Black Cabs, the taxis in London, and double-decker buses, some of which are featuring Bahamas images and logo on the most popular bus routes. The images were seen all over the city of London during the Christmas and New Year. A social media campaign was also launched in France and on the site Daily Motion to support new airlift initiatives. Now, with the visa waiver in place for citizens of the United Arab Emirates to visit the Bahamas, we are promoting 2 center vacations to this market via Orlando, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, New York, and Boston. India is being targeted for a visa waiver program about to get underway due to the strong potential for the Bahamas in the leisure, business, group, and weddings market out of India. Canada. The Bahamas Tourist Office in Toronto, Canada, launched successful television and radio advertising campaigns tagged with tour operator partners as a call to action in targeted cities during the fiscal year, which has positively impacted bookings this winter season. Television spots aired in Toronto, Calgary, Montreal, and Halifax, delivering over 18 million impressions, or 32% reach in those cities. Media luncheons for 100 media, tour operators, airlines, and hotel partners, and over 35 events promoting consumer direct engagements have delivered positive results. The Canada Tourist Office has partnered with Air Canada on co-op marketing initiatives, including development of a 12-page insert in Air Canada's in-flight magazine with a 1 million readership, an e-campaign, e-zine with a 3.8 million subscribers, and a 30-second in-flight video reaching 2.7 million passengers monthly. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Tourism continues to place emphasis on targeted approaches to optimize our reach and economize on spend, and our sports and vertical markets enable an excellent return on such investments. These sectors include aviation, boating, fishing, and diving. Our Florida-based team is focused on maximizing our efforts in partnership with public and private sector entities to grow visitations, to increase our market share, and visitor spends from these sectors. Mr. Speaker, the boating and recreational fishing industries, which have long sustained our family island economies, to continue to attract the highest net worth clientele in the region, and the Association of Bahamas Marinas, representing 59 of the 76 licensed marinas, has become a valued strategic partner in the promotion and growth of our tourism industry. The Ministry of Tourism hosted 6 boating flings last year. This caravan of pleasure boaters participates annually in the 4-day fling from Bahia Marina in Florida to Bimini, Grand Bahama, and Harbor Island during the months of June and July. Last year, 112 boats participated, however. The trip to Grand Bahama. Last year, 112 boats participated. However, the trip to Grand Bahama was canceled due to inclement weather. Working with the Balearia Fast Ferry to Grand Bahama, the ministry escorted 72 persons, 33 being anglers, to Freeport from Fort Everglades to participate in the Extreme Kayak Fishing Tournament last April. Mr. Speaker, in addition to our vertical sectors, the ministry routinely supports meetings, incentive, conference, and events business, as well as cultural, heritage, and entertainment activities and religious tourism. These efforts have resulted in increased heads and beds and significant group business coming from all these markets in 2018. Domestic tourism. Mr. Speaker, our domestic tourism initiatives, such as People to People and our Ambassadors Program, are now national events and are growing in strength and popularity, as is our festivals, which include the Junkanoo Summer Festival, Choo Choo Bahamian Festival, Goombay, Pineapple Festival, Bahamas Music and Heritage Festival in Exuma, Cat Island Rake and Scrape Festival. Mr. Speaker, we continue to subsidize and promote these festivals, which promote business growth, generate income for our local island communities, and encourage Bahamians and visitors alike to explore our country. Mr. Speaker, as I come to the end of my report on tourism activities, I'm reminded that there is no other industry which we rely to the extent that we do on tourism to power our economy and to provide direct and indirect employment to Bahamians on every island of our archipelago. Our stewardship of tourism, our willingness to make the changes necessary to improve its operation and to generate more revenues will depend on our collective commitment to confronting the issues facing the industry and to engage in problem solving. We are presented with many challenges, but also realize the many opportunities this industry affords us to create a better Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I sincerely believe that together, through this industry called tourism, we can achieve this goal. Mr. Speaker, in his portfolio allocation exercise, the Prime Minister combined the aviation sector with the Ministry of Tourism. The aviation sector includes the Bahamas Civil Aviation Authority, which is responsible for the safety and oversight of the aviation sector, the Airport Authority, which manages the 28 Family Island airports and security and fire and crash at the Lynden Pilling International Airport, the Nassau Airport Development Company, which developed and now manages all aspects of LPIA, Nassau Flight Services, which manages baggage and ground handling services LPIA, the Air Transport Advisory Board, which is responsible for advising the minister on which airline operators should be licensed to operate in the Bahamas, and Bahamas Air, which operates the national flag carrier. Mr. Speaker, as you can see, this part of my portfolio is significant, but I deeply appreciate the hard-working chairpersons who assist me in the day-to-day dealings of these entities. The aviation sector continues to be a challenge for the government, as it is a heavily regulated sector, subject to international standards and recommended practices, and the airport infrastructure is in need of an overhaul to the tune of approximately $200 million to address safety, compliance gaps, and redevelop Family Island airports that are in various states of disrepair. The Bahamas Civil Aviation Authority. Honorable members will recall that the Bahamas Civil Aviation Authority is a new entity created by the Civil Aviation Act of 2016. The transition from the Civil Aviation Department to the Civil Aviation Authority has been challenging, particularly for the air traffic controllers. Mr. Speaker, initially, a significant number of air traffic controllers had expressed the desire to remain in the public service, which, if affected, had the potential to create a national crisis, as the sector is already short-staffed, and the time to recruit, train, and develop radar controllers in our system takes a minimum of 5 years, so I'm advised. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say that due to the intervention of the chairperson of the authority, the very able, the very capable former governor of the Central Bank, Ms. Wendy Craig, who held a series of meetings with the executives of the Bahamas Air Traffic Controllers Union, a number of concerns were addressed, and as a consequence, all controllers in the bargaining unit, except 3, have opted to remain in the authority. Mr. Speaker, say that one more time. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, as the BCAA, I have to take it when I get it, man. When I hear good from her, I got to pause. No, I got to save it that moment. I wish they got that on camera. I hope they get that on camera. Angleston saying good to Freetown. Mother's sick. Mr. Speaker, as the BCAA continues the transition from the Civil Aviation Department to the Bahamas Civil Aviation Authority, it is identifying several critical areas that require significant human and financial resources to enable the organization to continue to build capacity so as to enable it to continue to be in compliance with our international obligations relating to safety, oversight, and aviation security. Shortly after I came to office, the BCAA underwent several audits, which resulted in the need to develop and implement corrective action plans to address the findings. Mr. Speaker, first there was the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. Yeah, I know, I'm not going to say anything bad, relax. I ain't going to, just relax. Indeed, but I ain't going to say nothing bad. Yes, I know. Yeah, I know, but I just... No, I'm not insinuating anything. I'm actually being quite honest. You can relax. I'm not just reporting to the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, first there was the Federal Aviation Administration. So testy about aviation, man. First there was the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, International Aviation Safety Assessment Audit, which occurred in August 2017. The IASA program focuses on a country's ability to adhere to international aviation safety standards and recommended practices. Mr. Speaker, the IASA audit had some adverse findings in 7 of the 8 critical areas of safety. However, as a result of the manner and speed in which the BCAA developed and instituted corrective actions, the FAA was satisfied that a sustainable safety oversight system had been instituted, and as a result, the Bahamas was not placed in Category 2. A Category 2 placement would have had serious implications as to no airlift would have been allowed into the destination, no new airlift would have been allowed into the destination, and Bahamas Air would also not have been able to fly to any new routes, which at the time was a problem because Bahamas Air was launching a new service into Houston. So we did well on that audit. Thank you. The next audit was an audit conducted by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, which is a specialized agency of the United Nations that at least once every 5 years audits our aviation sector to determine whether it is safe and there is appropriate oversight. The audit took place over the period the 25th of October to the 3rd of November. Mr. Speaker, the audit had a number of findings, but I'm pleased to report that there were no findings of a significant safety concern, which would have, again, had a serious consequence for the Bahamas. And the BCAA is aggressively developing a corrective action plan in response to the findings. Mr. Speaker, we will all recall the tragic accident that occurred just off the coast of North Andros, where 5 persons lost their lives. Initial reports indicate that the pilot was a hacker, which for those of you that do not understand that terminology, a hacker is a pilot.
6 persons.
6, oh sorry, 6, including the pilot, yeah. A hacker is a pilot engaged in selling seats on his plane to the general public without the appropriate licenses to engage in that type of commercial activity. When the public employs a hacker to fly from point A to point B, they are taking an enormous risk because that hacker has no license, meaning that he has not fulfilled the training and certificate requirements necessary to transport passengers for commercial gain. In addition, his or her plane may not have received the required level of maintenance, nor does it have the appropriate level of insurance or inspection to transport passengers. And as a consequence, you take your precious life in your hands each and every time you fly with a hacker. Mr. Speaker, I'm advised that the response to such accidents in the past were to invest in a flurry of actions to address the plague of hacking in the sector, but the actions were not sustained, and eventually, once public attention was diverted to other issues, the system reverted to the status quo. Not this time, Mr. Speaker. The BCAA has a moral and legal obligation to ensure that when the traveling public boards an aircraft, to the extent possible, there must be a level of confidence and satisfaction that the pilot and the aircraft have undergone the required due diligence and certification to offer the services. Therefore, I have charged the BCAA to work with the Airport Authority, the Air Traffic Services, the FBOs, the fixed base operators, to implement a regime that will identify and target those individuals with private licenses who are making a certain number of flights daily or weekly that suggest that they are providing a service for which they are not authorized to perform. Mr. Speaker, everyone knows who the hackers are, and I want to warn them, no more. Come into the BCAA and get yourself and your aircraft properly certified and licensed. We want to be able to make an honest living, not operate in the shadows with a business that is endangering the lives of the flying public. Please, come through the front door instead of hanging out at the back door. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, the Safety Oversight Department of the BCAA has implemented a number of activities as outlined, evaluating the single pilot air operator requirements with the goal of streamlining the process to encourage illegal operators to become compliant, institute a more structured on-the-job training program for the inspectors, conducting various enforcement investigations in conjunction with the Legal Counsel and Director General, developing a new approved operator seal, capturing the new Bahamas Civil Aviation Authority logo to be displayed on approved operator aircraft, working in conjunction with the Director General's office on a public relations campaign for the general public to educate and inform fellow Bahamians of approved licensed operators, general safety matters, and a host of other information geared towards timely dissemination of safety information. Audit team leads working aggressively on developing a sound corrective plan geared towards demonstrating the full implementation of standards and recommending practices. Mr. Speaker, the work ahead may seem like a daunting task with a never-ending list of requirements to those observing. However, the management and staff of the BCAA are focused and committed to accomplishing the organization's goals. The mandate over the next few months is to implement, educate, inform, support, empower, train, and effectively equip the inspectorate with the tools and resources necessary to obtain 80% and higher in the upcoming audits. Mr. Speaker, given the significant capital requirements of our aviation sector, made all the more complex and expensive by the facts that our aviation infrastructure is spread far and wide in this archipelago, I have been diligently pursuing a goal of mine, which is to earn a fee from every commercial aircraft that flies through the territorial space of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I have seen the studies that indicate that were we able to charge a fee for every commercial aircraft that flies through our airspace, like every other country on the planet, it would provide tens of millions of dollars for us to build airports and other infrastructure in our critical aviation sector. Right now, Mr. Speaker, our sovereign airspace is, for the most part, operated and controlled by the Americans, who charge anyone and everyone who flies through our airspace a fee, not Bahamians, but pay us not $1 of that fee, Mr. Speaker, not $1. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the previous administration, and specifically the member for Eglinton, would have stopped the crazy scenario of Bahamian-owned aircraft paying a fee to the Americans to fly through Bahamian sovereign airspace. But now we have to go a step further, Mr. Speaker, and take control of the revenue stream being realized from one of our prized national assets. I'm saying something good about her.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for...
Thank you, Speaker. I'm listening to the member, and I just want him to be, not to mislead the Parliament. The previous administration not only stopped or created an exemption for Bahamian aircraft flying in Bahamian airspace, but it set the foundational groundwork for the work that he's now undertaking. And I just think that he should be very clear, because he's giving the impression that he's launching some new frontier. And in fact, he's met in place a formula which mandates that he continue in a most aggressive fashion to ensure that we regain the airspace in this country, Mr. Speaker.
I don't know if it mandates me.
It mandates you. You can't back
the
out.
member for Eglinton. I didn't see any mandate when I got there. But if you say so, I mean, you're a senior person in this house. You've had it for 10 years. I get it. I'll be guided by you, and I accept that advice, and we'll move forward. But I was trying to be nice. I said that you got what you got, and thank you very much. And the Bahamian people are greatly appreciated for that. And I'm just saying, and I'm building on that. And that's how continuous governments go. You're wonderful. I love you. You've done a good job here. I ain't disputing that. Now let me see now, Mr. Speaker. Well, I've been throwing all that love around. I lost my speak. But we now have to go a step further, Mr. Speaker, and take control of the revenue stream being realized from one of our prized national assets, which is the airspace above the length and breadth of the country. Yes, we will have to pay the Americans a fee to operate our airspace. But we want that revenue stream, Mr. Speaker. We want that revenue stream. Mr. Speaker, I've requested a meeting with the Americans to continue the discussions that have been ongoing for decades to bring this matter to a successful conclusion. Hopefully, it will be sooner rather than later that I will have something positive to report to this House. Mr. Speaker, the Nassau Airport Development Company, NAD, continues on its mission to operate LPIA in a commercially viable manner.
Why you deal with that limitation?
Mr. Speaker, every time I land at the LPIA, I am proud that that airport,
I got that.
the gateway into the Bahamas for over 3 million visitors and Bahamians alike, looks as wonderful as it does. Yes, Mr. Speaker, as with every business, there are operational issues at that airport from time to time, but when left alone, it operates well. And we must always be reminded that the airport costs the taxpayer not $1. Not $1, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, NAD owes its lenders just over $500 million. $500 million, Mr. Speaker. That is a staggering amount, Mr. Speaker. But I repeat, NAD costs the taxpayer not $1, Mr. Speaker. Not $1. That is why, Mr. Speaker, it is critical that we allow NAD to operate like a business, free of interference from politicians, because we never want to jeopardize that airport from being able to service that $500 million in debt. In my last budget presentation, I would have talked at length about the operation of NAD under the previous administration, so there is no need to rehash that story. But suffice it to say that when the PLP ran NAD, the senior debt of NAD was downgraded by its rating agency, Fitch.
David.
Honourable member.
Strong desire to make political points as he goes along. But he will, if he is honest with this House, and I think he should be, because Bahamian people are intelligent, he will know that the downgrading of the airport by Fitch had much to do with this, at that time, the economy, which had been hit by 2 hurricanes, and it was the global economy, not the management of NAD, as he just indicated, Mr. Speaker.
Let me finish.
And you should be fair to the management.
I am about to say that.
Honourable members. If I may, at this point, I've permitted a lot of latitude on these points of orders. But let me just remind all members of the rule when it comes to point of orders. A member who rises on a point of order shall, when invited by the Speaker to do so, state the infringement of the rules on which his point of order is based, and then resume his seat. And so I permitted some latitude in that persons are rising on points of order, requesting members to substantiate a point, and then proceed to put on the record other unsubstantiated points themselves. And it makes it difficult for the chair to function, because when you raise issue that I am not aware of, it is difficult for the chair to rule. So I want members to restrict themselves to the rules, in that when you rise on a point of order, you state the infringement of the rules. The chair then will be guided by the rules to determine whether or not the point was well taken. If it was not well taken, the member on his feet will resume his presentation. If it is well taken, the chair will make a ruling. And that is the way we should proceed from this point forward. Otherwise, we're going to, while we want to keep a lively debate, I cannot permit one member to request that another member substantiate a statement, while at the same time putting on the record unsubstantiated statements themselves. And so we don't want, because that puts the chair in a position where it is difficult for me to rule, because the chair would not be aware of the statements that, or clarification. And the rules do not permit clarification other than on your particular statement. If you had made a statement, if a member had made a statement and another member on his feet is challenging or misinterpreting that statement, the rules permit you to rise again to clarify. But when no statement is before the chair, it is difficult for the chair to function.
And I
The chair
appreciate.
recognizes the honorable member for Engliston.
Thank you, Speaker. What I sought to do, the member just made an assertion, and I indicated was misleading the House, because he indicated that it was the prior administration's poor management of NAD which led to the downgrading. And I indicated he's misleading the House, because that is not the reason.
But that is exactly what I'm saying, honorable
I
member.
think the member agrees, Mr. Speaker.
It doesn't matter whether he agrees or not.
Oh, it doesn't.
The, the position of the chair is when you put
We want honest
information
debate, Mr. Speaker.
before the chair, if you put information before the chair and the chair cannot verify the information,
I understand,
the
Speaker,
chair-
but if the member does not object, I don't think the chair should be offended by it, Mr. Speaker. That's just my view, Mr. Speaker.
honorable member,
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
let's read this rule again. I don't know why I have to continually
I understand.
read these rules over and over. A member who rises on a point of order shall, when invited by the Speaker or the chairman to do so, state the infringement of the rules on which the point of order is based, and then resume his seat. The rule is very clear. You state the infringement of the rule, and you take your seat. You do not carry on with a speech. And that applies to every member. We've gone over this on so many occasions. And let me just conclude with the final paragraph of points of order, Rule 38.3. A member shall not dissent from the ruling by the Speaker, except by a substantive motion for that purpose. In other words, you don't challenge the ruling of the chair unless you go by way of a substantive motion. Yes, and we're going by the rules of the Parliament. Now, honorable member, there's another rule in this book which states that members should be silent. I can hear you.
Man, relax, man. Just let the speaker run his house.
I can hear you.
Say your house.
Keep quiet
You-
while the chair is speaking.
Who is running
Members
this thing?
are to remain quiet. That is also a part of the rules. Honorable member for Freetown, the chair recognizes you. Continue.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate you intervening because, you know,
Don't be distracted.
sometimes people come in this house and they think this is their house. There's the rules in this house. Let's abide by the rules. That's all I say. Oh, Jesus Lord.
Honorable member for Freetown, continue.
Thank you. In my last budget, I can talk in this house, man. In my last budget presentation, I would have talked at length about the operation of NAD under the previous administration. So there is no need to rehash that story here today. But suffice it to say that when the PLP ran NAD, the senior debt of NAD was downgraded by the rating agency Fitch. They opined at the time of the downgrade that given the fact that the sovereign debt of the Bahamas was being downgraded year after year under the PLP because of the country's poor economic outlook and runaway deficits, they were compelled to downgrade the senior debt of NAD as well. That's all I wanted to say. Mr. Speaker, when the downgrade came, NAD was forced to cease normal operations, cut costs, increase fees, and put aside more funds for debt service as was mandated in its debt covenants. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to advise that these stringent fiscal measures implemented by NAD resulted in something that we have not heard about ever in recent times in this country. And I want to be the very first to introduce this word back into the Bahamian vocabulary. Upgrade, Mr. Speaker, upgrade. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the rating agency Fitch has decided to upgrade the rating of the senior debt of NAD and return that debt to an investment grade of B minus. Mr. Speaker, prior to this upgrade, the debt of NAD had been downgraded to speculative or junk status. And it is important to note that with this upgrade, the debt has been reclassified back into the investment grade category. In addition to the stringent fiscal measures implemented by NAD, the Fitch rating agency was impressed by the professionalism of the staff at NAD and its seriousness in responding to and reversing its downgrade. In addition, and more importantly, Fitch was impressed about the growth projections for our tourism sector and how that would translate into additional passengers passing through LPIA, thereby creating additional revenue for NAD. So, Mr. Speaker, if you don't believe me that the Bahamian economy is turning around, believe Fitch. Mr. Speaker, I'm also delighted to advise that in 2017, in a recent airport service quality survey by the Airports Council International, the Lyndon Pindling International Airport ranked in the top 3 airports in the Latin American Caribbean region for passenger satisfaction for the 2nd consecutive year. I feel like naked now. She's going to get a fax. She'll be back, don't worry. Mr. Speaker, there were some 28 airports. There was some 28 airports. Oh, Lord. There were some 20. She's calling up people right now to get the facts. Mr. Speaker, there were some 28 airports in the category in which LPIA competed. And it's quite an achievement for LPIA to be ranked in the top 3. NAD, of course, looks forward to continuing to improve the ranking of LPIA in that ranking. Airport Authority. Mr. Speaker, the Airport Authority is charged with operating our 28 family island airports. Sadly, the annual allocation for the Airport Authority is a pitiful $6 million, which for 28 airports is woefully inadequate. Given the low probability that additional funds will be allocated to the Airport Authority, the authority has been charged to develop revenue streams to improve its ability to provide operational supplies and carry out routine repairs and maintenance at many of the country's airports. every time I sit in this house, every Family Island MP will start the wail of how badly run and poorly maintained the airports and their constituents are. Mr. Speaker, I feel their pain, and I have charged the Airport Authority to develop additional revenue streams and collect on some existing revenue streams to ensure that they can take care of, if nothing else, the basic needs of the airport. Every Family Island airport should have adequate seating, a roof that does not leak, air conditioning that works, and a bathroom that is clean and functions.
Don't lay fire trucks. Don't lay fire trucks. Fire trucks.
And a working fire truck.
Fire trucks. Fire trucks.
On the air side, the bushes should be kept low, the runway lights should work, and the perimeter should be kept secure. These are basic requirements, Mr. Speaker, and if your Family Island airport is not providing these basic requirements, tell me, and I will ensure a positive resolution to these concerns. Don't all rush at me now. Hold on now. Go. Mr. Speaker, hold on now. Hold on, this is the good bit. I am happy to announce that the plans for the construction of a new airport in Exuma are well underway.
Listen.
And the plans for a new airport in North Eleuthera are about to commence. Hold on, I come into you. These two airports are experiencing significant growth in passenger volumes and are therefore slated to receive completely new airport infrastructure in this upcoming F&M term. Mr. Speaker, these new airports will go a long way to keeping up with the exceptional growth being experienced by the economies of these islands. But I want to educate the public that these airports are extremely expensive. I estimate, ballpark, back of the envelope calculation, that each of these airports will cost at least $30 to $35 million to build. To expect the state to fund the reconstruction of these airports from the Treasury is simply unrealistic. And the appetite for the government to keep borrowing funds to build airports is not there. So the government will look to enter into public-private partnerships to assist in the funding of the construction of these airports. And when you enter into PPPs, the investors will expect to be repaid by the introduction of a passenger facility charge for every passenger that uses these new airports, in very much the same way the lenders to NAD are being repaid by a passenger facility charge billed on every passenger's ticket that travels through LPIA. This will be new for Family Island airports, but it is not unreasonable to expect that if your island receives a new airport, a funding mechanism must be in place to repay that investment, or a portion of it, and to keep the airport properly maintained. Mr. Speaker, this government is also committed to delivering a new terminal at Dead Man's Key, improvements in that airport during this 5-year term, which I know will bring much joy to the long-suffering residents of Long Island. Oh, Lord.
Got some notes scribbled down.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report that Bahamas Air, under this F&M government, continues to improve operationally. As the airline looks at an expanded route network and improved revenue generation, the national flag carrier continues to exceed expectation. Under the leadership of their chairman, former F&M leader Tommy Turnquest, and managing director Tracy Cooper, the airline is hitting milestone after milestone. Bahamas Air remains reliant upon the government's subvention, having been allocated $14.8 million for the fiscal year 2017-2018. It's important to note that given Bahamas Air's current mandate, it will continue to have to be subsidized. The question being, to what extent? The level of government subvention remains at the forefront of the board and executive management and will remain dependent upon the following factors: Bahamas Air, number one, Bahamas Air continues to operate several routes in and around the Bahamas, which if business and profitability ratios were the only determining factors, the airline would not operate these routes. Bahamas Air is used by the government to provide air transportation link to our archipelagic nation, and as such, there is a real cost attributable to the government for demanding that Bahamas Air provides that service. Bahamas Air has quantified that cost to be approximately $3 million per year. So what I'm saying is that Bahamas Air, if it was a privately owned business, probably wouldn't fly some of the routes that it does. And so Bahamas Air feels if you, government, direct us to fly to these routes because of a national strategy, then that cost should be assigned to you. Bahamas Air would wish to increase domestic fares to cover ever-increasing costs. But given the challenging economic circumstances, the government has asked the airline to maintain current airfares on domestic routes. That's a cost. A $20 fare increase across the board on domestic fares would provide an additional $3.5 million to Bahamas Air, which would improve the bottom line and decrease the subvention. So the government is asking it, keep the prices down. There's a cost associated with that. The government is expected to cover that. Bahamas Air currently employs over 650 persons. It is unquestioned that the airline is overstaffed. But again, the government has instructed that there be no major downsizing at Bahamas Air. Instead, the company has had to utilize attrition that has resulted in a reduction of payroll costs by approximately $1.3 million in the current year. So, 4, in 2016, Bahamas Air, with the support of the Ministry of Finance, borrowed $120 million to purchase 5 new aircraft and refinance its existing debt. To date, there have been no principal repayments on that debt. But the airline will have to begin principal payments during the fiscal year 2018-2019. I estimate that when those principal repayments kick in, they will equate to an additional $16 million a year of subvention that we'll have to provide Bahamas Air. And you add that to the interest, that alone, that debt alone, will cost the taxpayer $25 million a year in additional subvention. But we have nice new airplanes. Almost $10 million is needed for interest payments. Discussions are ongoing with the lenders to defer principal payments for a further year, with voluntary principal reduction payments of $6 million. So what we're saying is, we're going to the borrowers, and we're telling them, look, hold off. Do you mind deferring the principal repayments for another year? Give us another year to catch ourselves. But you know we're only kicking the can down the road. Okay? Mr. Speaker, during this current fiscal period, Bahamas Air has projected that its annual revenue will grow by 16%, from $74 million to $86 million, and its expenses will remain consistent with budget. That's what they told me. They obviously don't want to tell me what the real number is, but anyway. As such, it will not be needing any additional subvention over and above the $14 million that it currently receives. Mr. Speaker, other highlights worth mentioning about Bahamas Air. In the 3-month period of October to December 2017, the airline experienced a 15,000-person growth in passengers emanating from its 4 Florida destinations to the Bahamas when compared to the same period in 2016. The sizable growth can be attributed to additional hotel rooms, primarily from the opening of the Bahama Resort. The airline also expects to see a noticeable impact in charter revenues due to the operations of the Bahama Convention Center and Casino. Bahamas Air, beginning in April 2018, will start a 4-day weekly service to the island of Bimini in support of tourism movement for World Resorts Bimini, other hotels, and Bahamians traveling to the U.S. Rotations will be between Miami and Bimini. Bahamas Air will also commence once-weekly service for Club Med between Miami and San Salvador, starting October 2018, using its Boeing 737 service. So what will happen is the foreign visitors will fly from Paris, I believe it is, into San Salvador, There'll be a Bahamas Air flight waiting for them to connect them up to Nassau if they want to explore other islands in the Bahamas or want to go onward into the United States. Before, they would fly into San Salvador, and the connections did not line up. We're now intending to line that up, so when they land there, they can either stay in San Salvador or go onward to Nassau and to other destinations in the Bahamas. Operations into Haiti, Cape Haitian and Port-au-Prince, and Houston continue to grow, and the company is satisfied with those 2 new routes thus far, although the jury's still out. Mr. Speaker, the airline has completed the preparation of its 2018-2019 budget, and based on initiatives being put in place, we expect to see another 10.4% growth in revenue to $95 million, getting close to that $100 million mark. The airline believes that this growth is possible with the addition of another Boeing 737-700 series jet accommodating 138 to 144 additional seats. The jet will be used to assist with existing routes, more turns into Florida, help with placing more reliability into the Bahamas Air network, and assist with further expansion in 2018-2019. The additional aircraft will also assist with charter services, the charter services request, and allow the airline flexibility in size of aircraft that can be used. Presently, the airline is not able to accept any further requests for added scheduled service due to restrictions of the fleet. This added aircraft will assist with alleviating this restriction. With this additional jet, Bahamas Air will, for the very first time, achieve $100 million in annual revenues. Bahamas Air is actively searching for the new aircraft, and the good news is that it is expected that no additional funding will be required from the government for the acquisition of this plane.
Wow, 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 wow.
The airline, in conjunction with its lenders, will seek to acquire the additional aircraft through the transfer of collateral assets.
Super businessman.
The banks are currently holding cash collateral on the company's $120 million loan and have indicated that they will be willing to allow the airline to replace the cash collateral with an additional aircraft as collateral.
Wow, wow.
So instead of earning 1% on our fixed deposit, we could now turn that aircraft into providing money for us.
There we go.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've come to the end of my address.
Riveting.
There were a number of areas in my portfolio that I didn't touch on, but I will address them this year in the year-end budget debate. I always enjoy talking to the Bahamian people. I also always enjoy representing the good people of Freetown. I think this is an awesome responsibility. I've come from the private sector into the government.
Thank you.
And I'm trying to use my experience much in the same way as Exuma is on the other side to introduce a different perspective into government. I don't get it all right all the time. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand.
Come on now, come on.
I don't know all the machinations and the legal mumbo jumbo that some other people might know. But I'm trying my hardest, Mr. Speaker. I'm trying to come here, an honest businessman,
Make a contribution.
just a small, I'm not educated, come here, try and make a difference. So on behalf of the great people of Freetown, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the
Granddaughter, I
Bahamas.
thank you. Thank you.
As many?
Understood.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I note the insistence of the leader of government business brought me at this time. And note that it has me speaking now and then again interrupting it by an hour, but so be it. I am not swayed by mathematics, but rather by the will of the people that will be listening to me and whom I have my confidence in. Mr. Speaker, let me say thank you for recognizing me. I rise on behalf of the resilient people of Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. I thank them for their support. It has endured now for 27 consecutive years, though my presence in this honored hallowed chambers have been over 5 non-consecutive terms. I rise on behalf, as I said, of those people. This is an onerous demonstration, Mr. Speaker, of their confidence, and I'm privileged to represent their interests in this honorable House. Notwithstanding the apparent disdain the side opposite has for my constituency, I'll continue to fight for their clinics, for more investments, more jobs. I can come to it, yeah. More jobs, better roads, and for better docking facilities. Mr. Speaker, their love and loyalty have strengthened my resolve as a public servant, and my commitment to them is deeper than ever before. I endeavor to work daily to conduct myself in public life, to prove myself worthy of their continued support and confidence. Mr. Speaker, I've said on more than one occasion that no price tag is too great for the people of Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. It is clear, to me, that is, that the member for Elizabeth still does not understand that every Bahamian, no matter on which island they live, has the right to have access to basic health care and essential services. There's no priority of citizenship by island. Each Bahamian has the right to live where he or she wishes. Our responsibility to them is to ensure that they have a minimum access to essential services and, where possible, access to enhanced services. Nothing is too good for any Bahamian. Nothing is too good for Cat Island. Nothing is too good for San Salvador. Nothing too good for Rumkey. Mr. Speaker, I take note that the BAIC office in San Salvador was closed. That office was a catalyst for the entrepreneurial spirit of the people there. What a shame that the people of San Salvador are no longer afforded the benefits derived from an agency that was doing good work, bringing out the creative ingenuity, bringing out the best of San Salvador. This cannot be the government that committed to spurring migration back to the island.
The member for Golden Gates.
Why am I being interrupted?
If the member would yield, Mr.
Is he on a point of order?
I'm not yielding.
If he would
No,
yield.
he's on a point of order.
No, he never said point of order.
A point of order, Mr.
He never
Speaker.
said point of order. He
Point of
asked
order,
that I
Mr. Speaker.
yield.
Oh, you're not yielding?
I'm not yielding.
Mr.
Okay.
Speaker, on a point of order.
You're on a point of order now?
Yes, sir.
Will you ask him now to speak the rule in which I'm breaching then? You just want him, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker,
state
we just want to brief
state the infringement of the rule.
the correction of the information provided to the House.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
A point.
Misleading. Misleading.
Hold.
Misleading.
Honorable member, is it a point of clarification on a matter that you raised in your speech?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I did. Yes, I did,
All
Mr.
right,
Speaker.
state.
I referred to nothing he said, Mr. Speaker. I never said anything. I never attributed any of my comments to what he said. I am speaking of what I observed of the fact. BAIC in San Salvador was closed. And I am saying that has caused, and it has interrupted the advancement of the entrepreneurial spirit of the people there. That's what I've said. He never spoke to that.
Never did.
Right, that's all I make that point.
Yes.
So what is the point of
Honorable-
order? What is the rule I'm infringing, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, there's an inference that the work of the San Salvador office, Mr. Speaker, was doing something in regard to entrepreneurial
Honorable
spirit,
member, honorable member,
creating entrepreneurial opportunities, Mr. Speaker.
honorable member. Honorable members, let the chair do its job. The honorable member for Golden Gates.
Gate.
The point you are raising is similar to the point I made earlier, that when you rise on a point of order,
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
you should state the rule
Yes.
that is infringed
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
and not carry on with a speech
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
and introduce new matters.
Kindly.
And so in this event,
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
the point is not well taken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I was indicating, Mr. Speaker, with the closure of BIC office in San Salvador, it does not lend itself to what I'm saying. You know, this government, during the course of its campaign, had as one of its promises spurring migration back to the island. And, you know, with a BIC office in an island, that could attract people to go back to an island, to be able to take advantage of what they offer. The BIC is not just about agriculture. It's about industrial and other issues as well, teaching people how to make crafts and how to add value to products. Right? But, you know, Mr. Speaker, this government has a basic challenge. It has a basic challenge. What they say is very different from what they do. What they do very often, though, targets the privileged few. I want the member for Elizabeth to know that I want my clinics built. The same technical officers who advise the former Minister of Health are the same who offers the same advice. Mr. Speaker, I spoke to one recently and got confirmation that it was the ministry's recommendation to build as planned. It is disingenuous, therefore, to suggest otherwise now. I just want those clinics built for my constituents who are citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And yes, Mr. Speaker, when we took office in 2017, we could have gone through the mathematics, 2012, we could have gone through the mathematics of determining the amount, looking at the statistics to see how clinics are being used, and what should be done in respect to the mini hospital in Exuma, for example, or the mini hospital in Abaco. We could have done the same thing and said something about it. But no, we appreciate that citizens, wherever they are, ought to be provided the access that is necessary for proper health care. And so I expect the same thing from this government. Mr. Speaker, you know, when I consider this exercise, this budgetary halftime exercise, it is nothing less than a political campaign, a marketing and public relations exercise by the government. It is mere smoke and mirrors. Rather than an exercise in dissecting the fiscal policies that traditionally underpin a government's vision through its stated priorities and objectives, the budget statement is but a litany of words and figures which I do not think that the government itself understands. Many Bahamians, and I'm no exception, are disappointed. This FNM government appears more interested in revisiting the past, in character assassination, naming and shaming, and printing up the accounting books, rather than using all of the instruments of government to improve the lives of Bahamians, the purpose of which they were elected to office. They were elected to govern. In their, Mr. Speaker, in their collective imagination, the pasture is getting greener. It's getting greener. When in reality, there's no feed. People are suffering and expressing their level of discontent and despair ever so loudly each passing day. What irony. I ask, contrast what we presented. Contrast what we presented. Contrast what we saw, what was presented with a few days back by the government, with the position of the PLP government when it came to office in 2012, when we gave our first midterm budget report. Let's contrast that. What we did, we thoroughly analyzed the failed policies of the FNM, but we did not dwell on them ad infinitum. Instead, we moved very quickly to lay out a plan and program of governance, which, as events subsequently proved, did put the government on the right track. The truth to this fact is to be found in the answer to the question, where would our economy be today in the absence of that, Bahama, and the point? Where would it be? That's the answer right there. It was on the right track, Mr. Speaker. The essential role of government is governance. It is not the role of government to conduct witch hunts. Governments are not auditors-in-chief. Their essential role is to provide for the peace, security, the social and economic upliftment of all our people. Not so with this government. But we are not surprised. As we all knew, they had absolutely no plans, no programs, and no vision to move the Bahamas forward. And as someone once remarked to me, they are suffering from didn't expect. They are suffering from didn't expect. Sadly, the results are now plain for all to see. I refer to this administration as a tabloid administration. It is merely content to grab headlines and put out fake news. The recent disgraceful conduct over the Oban affair is sufficient evidence of this. Mr. Speaker, when the mid-year budget statement was delivered, it did nothing to allay the concerns and views of us here in the opposition that we expressed during the budget debate 9 months ago. In fact, they have become more heightened. This government has no plans to govern this country. In numerous cases, their policy decisions have made conditions in the country worse for our people. The honorable member for East Grand Bahama has demonstrated clearly that he does not understand the figures that were presented to him by his own ministry. The Minister of Finance indicates that during the period 2016, for example, 2017, there was a shortfall in revenue of some $200 million. Right? He indicates that, he acknowledges that. If the minister would have done even a basic analysis behind this shortfall, as opposed to attributing that to mismanagement and fiscal imprudence, he would have found that one of the main reasons for this was the devastating effect of Hurricane Matthew, which resulted in revenue inactivity and lost revenues due to exemptions provided to individuals and companies under various exigencies orders. At the same time, the minister should have appreciated that there had to be a corresponding spike in expenditure as a result of the massive cleanup and the nature of emergency restoration and remediation. The other side deliberately forgets that we had two devastating hurricanes in a short space of 12 months, Joaquin and Matthew. Each had a direct bearing on our fiscal situation, resulting in a decline in revenues and an increase in expenditures. This is the analysis I would have expected from the minister. Instead, Mr. Speaker, this government used this very noble and necessary intervention to raise foolish concerns about fiscal mismanagement by the previous
administration. It is dishonest, therefore, to make sweeping accusations without fully understanding what one is talking about. Moreover, I would refer the Minister of Finance to various reports by the IMF, the IDB, the Central Bank of the Bahamas, and Moody's, which shows the impact of these acts of God on the fiscal indices. The honest comparison would be, if they wish to boast about their fiscal prudence, is to look at the revenue of the half year without the revenue inactivity and the increased expenditure caused by the hurricanes, and then compare that to what you have done. You see, it is accepted, as the finance minister said, that $200 million was lost because of revenue inactivity. And when you look at the numbers that he has put forward, he boasts that there's approximately $25 million revenue more than the previous period. Well, that don't speak to prudent management, don't speak to fiscal proper management. Because if you did, you'll take into account the $200 million loss in the December 2016 period. Because here listed, it would have actually been just over $1 billion, and you have not reached the $1 billion mark. You are at $880 million. So it doesn't. So if you do it honestly and compare apples to apples, there's no comparison in respect to revenue. In respect to expenditure, the same formula could apply. You didn't have the exemptions to give, as we did during that period. You didn't have what I call the extraordinary expenditures that you had to make for remediation. But yet still, your expenditure is that much more, over $500 million more, than we did during that period. Is that prudent fiscal management? That's the honest comparison that you wish to make. And as I said earlier, through the treatment of this budgetary exercise, it basically represents nothing more than a marketing exercise devoid of any true understanding of the underlying reality. It is an all-out attempt to represent certain facts which are not in fact there. Before I leave this point, I read somewhere that the Minister of Finance made a statement which refers to the immoral use of the VAT revenues. I really don't understand what he means and why he used the word immoral. Any expenditure of funds must be approved by this House through budgets. And to use the word immoral is taking this too far. As the minister would know and has acknowledged, VAT funds are not segregated from the general revenues. And when compiling a budget, the technocrats do not make assumptions on what is VAT and what is not. So how do you arrive at this statement that the VAT expenditure, the use of VAT revenues is immoral? How do you arrive at that when there's no segregation into the consolidated fund? Here again, Mr. Speaker, emotions and gimmickry has overtaken the honorable member. Mr. Speaker, I know that my time is limited, but I'll seek to touch on as many salient issues of national importance as my time will allow. So I just touch basically on the economy. Mr. Speaker, by its own admission, the government has intentionally added to the rate of joblessness in this country. Unemployment has returned to double digits. Revenue performance has deteriorated. The state of national health care has worsened. Our immigration laws and policies are under assault, and conditions have worsened. The level of borrowing some 1.4 billion in 9 months, is unsustainable with no accountability. And as you reminded us in the book of Proverbs, it was that those who borrow are slaves to the lender. I remind them of that as well. I just find that out. To top it off, Speaker, there's no immediate economic relief or plans for New Providence, Grand Bahama, or any of the family islands. Further, the Minister of Finance openly admitted to withholding much-needed funds for capital expenditure, robbing scores of communities and thousands of Bahamians of basic government services and amenities to which they are entitled. Consequently, thousands of Bahamian households continue to suffer hardship. The government, for its part, continues to describe the problems facing our country. Fabricate and invent other problems, such as corruption, excessive hiring in the public service, abuse of the public purse, and more importantly, engaging themselves in what I call victor's justice. Victor's justice. Victors. Now, you're the victors. You all are the victors. I expect you to come. The Oban Petroleum deal for East Grand Bahama presented unrealistic jobs creation numbers. But more fundamentally, Mr. Speaker, the lack of transparency, accountability, and the specter of fraud, deceit, and sleight of hand have caused immeasurable reputational damage to our country. Locally, our constituents have lambasted this government for their actions, eroding much public confidence in this government's ability to govern us honestly, openly, and in our best interests. Under the current cloudy and suspicious circumstances, the PLP could not support this agreement. There could be little doubt that there could be no rational explanation for the conduct of the government on this issue. The cogent evidence is that the whole deal is fraught with fraud. And if you were had, Mr. Prime Minister, or if you were taken, Mr. Prime Minister, there are sufficient incidents of misrepresentations for you to extract yourself from this debacle. There's enough instances of it. Otherwise, I have the question to ask, who is the mystery man or mystery woman to bring this project to your attention to cause you to act in such shortly a manner? Are they from Freeport or Nassau? Are they from Nassau? Okay, good. No, you should call it in. I do? The Prime Minister, what I said, Mr. Prime, if you have been had or if you've been taken, you have an opportunity, there's enough incidents of misrepresentations around this whole transaction for you to extricate yourself from it. That's what I said. The Prime Minister, see, let's go down. Let me tell you why. I understand you. Let me tell you why, Mr. Prime Minister, I say there's sufficient incidents for you to extricate yourself from this. See, they cause you, or you yourself, this mystery person or whoever, cause you on the 19th of February. You represented on the 19th of February that the document being signed by the Secretary of the Cabinet with Peter Krieger was in fact the heads of agreement. Remember that? You didn't say then that this was a ceremonial event for the cameras. You didn't say that. Now, the press has indicated that the man signing the document, Peter Krieger, did not sign. I think we all have come, I think he's now admitted that, everyone has admitted that Krieger did not sign his own name, but he signed that of Sanpat Duna, the president. Now, what's interesting, there was a letter written by Ms. Sanpak Duna, or Sanpal Duna, that, look, I authorized him to sign my name. Well, that's okay. You could do that. I could authorize you to sign my name. And that's perfectly okay. But you know, when I look at the signature on the letter and the signature on the document that was made, it's questionable. What I get a speaker? There was no signature. No, I thought my signature. Right? So that I'm saying that raises further question. There are enough incidents for you to extricate yourself from this, Mr. Prime Minister. See, you and your cabinet were witnesses to the signing. None of you disclosed that this was not the real signing, but only ceremonial. I wonder if the persons who were the witnesses, whether the cabinet ministers knew that they were participating in a ceremonial event, or they knew that they were signing something actual, right? And then, you know, on the 1st of March, he tabled this document he's called the Heads of Agreement. And, you know, when we saw it, we didn't expect to see, we all expect to see Krieger's signature. Of course, behold, I discussed that. We saw Dona's signature instead. As I said again, this is questionable because when you look at that signature and look at the signature in the letter, you know, it raises questions again. And as I said, it was never disclosed that this was ceremonial. It's only after all these issues. See, that's what causes the problem. You know, that when people raise matters and then everyone starts running for cover, then so this concept of ceremonial signing came up, all as an afterthought. So questions have to be asked. Will you say whether there's more than one document, Mr. Prime Minister? Was there more than one document signed? I don't know. Yeah. No, I don't actually answer it now. It's a document signed by Mr. Krieger. Like, you have the opportunity to hear what I ask, and you have the opportunity to go research and respond when you speak. It's a document signed by Mr. Krieger with Mr. Dona's name, the document that was tabled by the Prime Minister in the House. Is the document tabled in the House then a true and valid agreement? Whatever the answers to these searching questions, as I indicated, it's very difficult. I can't. It's very difficult to have a rational explanation to all these incidences of misrepresentation. And that's why I said, you know, Mr. Prime Minister, have you been had? Have you been taken? There are enough of them for you to extricate yourself from it. But because, you know, at the end of the day, the country implicitly should be able to rely on the word of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister you have an ethical responsibility always to tell the truth. And in fact, you have a legal responsibility not to mislead the House. And so that is the crux of this. That requires, as I said, if you've been had, if you've been taken, there are enough incidents of misrepresentation that's been out there in the public domain for you to extricate yourself from this whole matter. And Mr. Speaker, you know, I heard the numbers being bandied about persons who were separated from the public service. But I think it was in November sometime, the official government records that was announced spoke about 2,500 persons being separated from the public service in just 6 months, May to November 2017. And thereafter, we all know that the firings continued unabated. Now, the Minister of Finance disputes this mass firings and explained the separations as matters of natural attrition. including the unceremonious firings of permanent and pensionable officers with good years of service. Right? You know, there's a principle called the improbability of coincidence. The improbability of coincidence. No, this level of attrition, if I accept the words of the Minister of Finance, is unprecedented in the public service and never happened during previous administrations. Not on the Papa, not on the Christie. Right? But it is coincidentally happening during this particular administration. Equally coincidental are reports of staff at the Ministry of the Public Service being inundated with contracts to be executed. That the backlog requires many of them to work overtime to process these contracts.
You mean new hiring?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. New hiring.
Could it be that certain people were identified and separated to make way for persons of the government's own choosing? You know, they'll deny that. But, you know, as I said, Mr. Speaker, the improbability of coincidence. Now, Mr. Speaker, to date, the real and tangible jobs are being created by Bahama and the Point. And now, you know, we see the Ministry of Labor recently announcing a jobs fair for the project at Ocean Key, suggesting immediate job offerings. Is it not ironic that the People's Time government, on the one hand, is causing mass firings and adding to the country's joblessness, while projects executed by the PLP government continue to keep the economy afloat through the creation of thousands of real, well-paying jobs, yielding positive economic benefits for our people? It's the People's Time, all right? But thank God for the PLP. You know, mass firings on Friday. You know, look at the irony. Mass firings on Friday and job fairs on Saturday. What irony? Right? The irony continues, you know, Mr. Speaker. Equally ironic is the initial claim, I think by the Attorney General, he's speaking on some talk show, that the mass firings have saved the government some $75 million. That's what he had to say. I've not heard no one disputed it yet. I didn't hear the finance minister dispute those utterances by the Attorney General, so I take it as him saying it as true. Well, yet the government, they have $75 million in savings. Yet the government returned to Parliament and is in Parliament and borrowed $90 million on the heels of $722 million and later $750 million. The first borrowings with $90 million, that was said to be earmarked for the airport upgrade in Exuma and a jobs training program, among other projects that would not increase or impact the budget deficit or national debt.
Honorable member.
The government apparently changed.
Honorable member for Cat Island Rumpkin Salvador. There's a member on the floor on a point of clarification.
I didn't hear what he said. I just saw him stand up. I would have heard.
Yeah, he's on a point of clarification. Honorable member, is that on a matter that you presented in your...
It's in connection with contracts at the Ministry of Public Service that I presented earlier.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I heard the member talk about two things. One, the contracts that we've issued at the Ministry of Public Service,
and the fact that we have put together a unit to look at contracts. They're working overtime.
They got backlog.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member. Honorable member. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member referred to contracts, firings, and personnel who are called upon to work overtime because of the number of contracts in the public service. All of them I shall address right now. This is clarifying what I said about contracts. No.
Honorable members.
What I said about contracts.
Honorable members. Honorable members. No, it's a point of clarification based on what he presented.
I made about contracts.
By the rules.
Firings.
Yes.
No, that's okay.
Let the speaker run the house.
I'm not giving a speech, South Andres. The honorable member raised the issue of contracts. I said in my presentation to this Parliament that scores of contracts issued by the previous government, in which the member of Cat Island was the Deputy Prime Minister, scores of contracts were issued for 3 months and expired. Expired in June. June 30th, 2017. Hundreds of contracts issued by the PLP expired in August 2017. In addition to those contracts that expired in 2017, all of the persons hired under the 52 weeks program, their contracts fell away in December of 2017. No. But the honorable member told me, your member for Cat Island, told me the fact that they intended and the fact that they were working, that legitimized their contract. That's a statement you made to me several weeks ago. Several weeks ago.
Honorable members.
No, you said it in the House. Right here. Right here. But you're the lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. You're the lawyer. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, what I did say is what the member from Angleston said. I said to the Bahamian people that 1,700 persons were sent to work without contracts. They didn't have any written contract, no written authorization. They were just told to go to work. In my presentation, I said we are different from the PLP. I said we are different from the PLP.
You know the rules.
And yes,
Declare 5 points. Yeah.
hold it in for you. Hold it in for you. I said we are different. And I said those persons who are performing and doing their work in the government, we will issue them a contract. So yes, we are working hard. There is a backlog of contracts that we must issue. Yes. And we are renewing some of those contracts. We are renewing some of those contracts. Finally, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker. The honorable member for Cat Island continues to say to this Parliament and to the nation, we are firing people. And I say to him, and he could explain this to the Bahamian people perhaps himself, if you as a government issue to a worker a contract for 3 months, and after the 3 months have expired, if that person has to leave office after his contract expired that was issued by you, who is responsible for the firing?
Honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, San Salvador.
Mr. Speaker, the member did confirm that there's a mass contract exercise going on in this ministry. The circumstances under which he, as his ministry, he explained why it is necessary. And, you know, as I said, I assume, but did not concede, that the firings, as he called it, were by attrition. Attrition. You all in charge, man. You are in charge. No. If you are in charge, it's under your watch. It's under your watch that they'll be. You can't. I respond. Let me have my time. No. It's moving now, and I answered it. The speaker.
But you got to still tell us who fired the people.
Speaker.
Who gave the 3-month contract.
Oh.
Huh?
Speaker.
Nation who fired the people that they gave the 3-month contract.
Speaker.
Honorable members.
Speaker, the answer is clear in response to what he wants. He's in charge. He could renew the contract if he wished. If he doesn't, then he wouldn't. Yeah. Speaker, in respect to these borrowings,
honorable members, the member for Care Island has the floor.
Apparently has changed his mind in respect to the use of this $90 million. And they said that this funds will not be drawn down in this fiscal year. And their latest salvo is that they are determining how that $90 million will be spent. That's what's said by the Minister of Finance. To me, this suggests fiscal irresponsibility, suggests that there's no transparency or accountability, or no clear and focused policy, strategy on the governing the fiscal affairs of this country, or national affairs, generally for that matter. It's because I said, no vision, no plan. At the beginning of the debate, at the beginning of this debate, there's another resolution tabled for the borrowing of another $100 million. That's what it is. So, Mr. Speaker, it is also ironic that as the government rails about PLP mismanagement of the fiscal affairs of this country, that's what they're doing. Their record shows that overall expenses are $400 million more than last year, which I pointed out earlier when I went to the performance document laid on the table. It's over 500. I might know right. I said 400 million over. Right? It's fine. Yeah. But you want. I try to be kind to you in this written. I try to come. Yeah. Right? So further, Mr. Speaker. After boasting of saving $75 million from mass separations from the public service, the member for East Granbam reported to this Honorable House that the public service salaries are $50 million more than last year. Mr. Speaker, I have to borrow the characterization by the member from Exuma that this has to be voodoo economics. I encourage the FNM. I encourage the FNM to simply take responsibility of being in government. Take responsibility for the decisions and take responsibility for the consequences of their actions. There is no need for the caveats. The single largest expense line item in the budget, as is pointed out, is the debt redemption. And it has been that way for quite some time now. So let us compare apples to apples in our analysis. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, is that in 2012, we met a fiscal deficit in excess of $500 million with deteriorating revenue performance. Not including now this $500 million deficit now. That will include this overhang that they continue to talk about here, or the bills left behind. And that $500 million was calculated on a cash basis and not on an accrued basis. And as you shake your head, West End, I will remind you what the Prime Minister had to say about the economy and how they left it in 2012. They left it in a wheelchair. But when I went looking for it, it was in intensive care. Right? And so that's what we met, Mr. Speaker. Your Prime Minister said it was in a wheelchair. When I went looking for it, I found her in intensive care. Mr. Speaker, our medium-term fiscal consolidation plan successfully reduced this sustainably year over year by some 80% before the two devastating hurricanes in 2015 and 2016 that crushed the country's infrastructure, shut down the country for almost 1 week, severely damaged the tourism plant, and crushed a number of economies on several family islands. Additionally, liberal tax exemptions were extended to private citizens and numerous businesses to assist them in rebuilding their lives and businesses. I mean, this is an inconvenient truth to some among us because it does not fit the narrative of corruption and mismanagement that others seek to spew. But those are, Mr. Speaker, the unvarnished facts. The principal question now is, where do we as a country go from here? Are we looking behind and creating boogermen? Or are we pressing forward and blazing new trails for the new generation of Bahamians to follow and be confident in doing so? Mr. Speaker, you know, I'll be remiss if I don't touch on the blacklisting by the European Union. You know, according to several news agencies, both local and international, the European Union tax experts took a policy decision to blacklist the Bahamas along with St. Kitts, Nevis, and U.S. Virgin Islands. This decision was endorsed by the European Union finance ministers at their regular meeting held, I think it was yesterday. Even though the government said it would do all in its power to avoid another blacklisting, we find ourselves being blacklisted. The larger question is, what is the policy of the government to effectively push back against this onslaught of our second largest industry? You know, the Prime Minister came to Parliament very early, entreating that we stand unified on matters affecting this industry. We agreed. We did so notwithstanding the government's decision to take an extended summer vacation break after the post-election ceremonies and celebrations, when it had sufficient time to address the threats to avoid blacklisting. Of course, no sooner than we said, look, we want to be unified on this matter, we saw the Prime Minister returning to the campaign trail, telling the world that the PLP destroyed the financial service sector. I think he used the word dying. He said that the financial services were dying. And I think someone came back and said, well, no, they ain't dying. Yeah, he has said that in November. Right? He said it was dying. Right? And of course, we're trying to help and work with you on this issue. We should be unified on these matters. Right? And this is an example of what I mean when I say this government is intent. That's what basically naming and shaming. So they naming and shaming, you know, the death of the financial services industry is being put at the feet of the PLP's administration. That's what he did in November. Right. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, it brings me to discuss, because this all is intertwined, to discuss the multilateral convention for the, well, put another way, the Automatic Exchange Tax Information Convention, out of which you have what they call the multilateral or the multilateral or bilateral protocols. You know, the Prime Minister, in his communication on the 13th of September 2017 in this House, spoke of the threat of the blacklisting, how large it loomed. The threat of blacklisting loomed large. And in that communication, he spoke to the strenuous and decisive efforts of this government since May, since the election, to avoid the threat of immediate blacklisting by the OECD and EU. And of course, they can't help themselves. Blame was put at the foot of our administration. Right? The accusations being that we failed to meet the required number of bilateral tax exchange agreements. The suggestion was that we waited 2 years after committing to the bilateral protocol. And he went as far as to say that, it took us until December 2016 to fulfill our commitment by sending letters out to try to fulfill our commitment. That same accusation had been made before, I think, by the member for St. Anne's. And I intervened at that time to correct the view that the Prime Minister and his government had formed in this relation. I just wanted to correct it because they may have misread the records or had not really looked at the file or appreciated what they were saying. And I tried to intervene, to speak to it. Unfortunately, at that time it was in response to the member from St. Anne's. I did speak to it somewhat, but the view obviously persisted because, again, during his communication in December, as I indicated, the Prime Minister continues to lay blame at our feet. And again, I sought to intervene. You would recall, Mr. Speaker, that I was not permitted to do so by yourself because I was saying to you at that time, Mr. Speaker, that the communication contained controversial statements because they were pointed at us. It was not allowed, so I sought to get the Prime Minister at least yield. He did not. Now, my intervention, because there's this assumption that every time an opposition member seeks to intervene, it's to cause problems. It's not to cause problems. We are part of government, We want to recognize. We're just in opposition, right? Because I wanted to intervene just to speak to the government, to warn the government that despite their strenuous...
Honorable member.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Before you proceed any further down that road, are you suggesting that it is the view of the chair that when you made an intervention, it was to cause problems?
No, Mr. Speaker. I didn't say that. I said the government. I used the word government. You're the Speaker. I didn't say the Speaker. When I could speak to the Speaker, I don't have to veil yourself behind the government. If I thought it was you, I'll say you. I said you did not permit me. And that was your right as the Speaker to say, no, I don't want you to intervene. And I didn't challenge it.
No,
I sought to get the Speaker to yield to me. And he did not yield. And so I sat down, took my seat.
Right.
Now that I have an opportunity to address what I wanted to do, I'm now addressing it.
No, I heard you say that this belief, or words to that effect.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
This belief that whenever someone intervenes.
I hope you don't fall in that category, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I'm just trying to make sure that wasn't directed at the chair.
No, it was not. I said the government in particular. I used the word government. I didn't say Speaker. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, I could speak to you directly if I wish. I was not speaking to you in that connection. And I would hope that you do not, every time any one of us seek to intervene, that it is assumed that is to cause problems. It is that you should allow us to at least say what we're going to talk about and then sit down if you don't believe that it should be said or if you don't want it to go further. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, my intervention at that time was to, just to alert the government that despite their strenuous and decisive efforts that they were speaking about in that communication, that the goalposts continually move. In fact, they have more than one goalpost. And it continues to move. And I just want to tell you, it doesn't matter, it doesn't depend on who's in charge. Whether the PLP or the F&M. Right? It don't matter whether it's the PLP or the F&M. And I say, and the clearest illustration of this fact, and I wanted to point this out as you were speaking, or during the course of that communication, is that the clearest illustration of this fact about the moving of the goalposts is the move from the bilateral protocol to the multilateral protocol and the ensuing threat to be blacklisted. That's what I wanted to talk about, because that is how the goalpost was moving, because the industry had advised our administration, the industry here, right, told us that the route to go was the bilateral route. We accepted that position, and we signed on to the bilateral route, right? There were no thresholds as to what one has to do to pursue the bilateral arrangements. That was later set in October, I think, of 2016, when they said, well, look, you now have to sign about 50 bilateral agreements. That's why the letters only went out in December, because we were only informed about that in November. So a letter went out to various countries and jurisdictions in December 2016 saying, look, we are being urged to sign on to at least 60 of these tax exchange agreements, right? And we need to get this on the way. As a country, you have to wait for their response, right? So what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, right, is see, on the recommendation of the industry stakeholders, we had decided on the bilateral protocol. Right? Now, in that same meeting in October, one of the outcomes of that meeting in October that set this numbers that we had to sign, the numbers of agreements that we have to enter into, that's when they introduced this other this matter of what they call the inclusive framework that dealt with the base erosion and profit sharing initiative, right? And it was then at that meeting decided that certain jurisdictions should be invited to become a part of that protocol. Hence, you would have seen that, and as a result of that, the Bahamas government was invited in March, not until March of 2017 now, right, to become a part of that framework, right? And so, but in the meantime, they came in February and told us, look, now we don't want you all to be before you going adopting the multilateral protocol rather than the bilateral, even though the convention allows us as a jurisdiction to elect to be that. But the goalpost is moved. Right. In the meantime, now we in the middle of elections, right? So they then invited us to become part of the inclusive framework that relates to the base erosion and profit sharing initiative. Right now, so Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Yamaco, on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
State the infringement of the rule.
That the honorable member is misleading this House with regard to the chronology of events that would have occurred to cause the Bahamas to be where it is. At this moment, Mr. Speaker, I would not want to tend, because it has some writings on it, but I would refer to it. is the Bahamas Financial Services Board, the Bahamas approach to the Common Reporting Standards, Government Briefing 2000, May 2017. And Mr. Speaker, in that briefing, the CEO and Executive Director of the Bahamas Financial Services Board, I think, eloquently articulated the series of events. And I'm not seeking to pass blame, but we are in a place, and I agree with the member for Exuma, where as a nation, we have to bind together to respond to where we find ourselves. But I quite recall when this matter was raised, and the issue of the signing on to the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance. And if you check the Hansard as to why we weren't expedient, and I said we, because I live in the Bahamas, and in that dispensation, the Progressive Liberal Party was then in government. And I quite recall that Mr. Pascal traveled to the Bahamas. He had conversations with the President Attorney General. And the nature of those conversations was the sloth with which we had by that time only signed on to one of the protocols when there was 65 that we should have signed on to. And when Cat Island, and that's why I said you can refer to the Hansard, indicated at that time that time had just run out. His explanations for why we weren't as diligent as we were in responding to.
Mr. Speaker, I was not talking with diligence. No. What I'm attempting to do here, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member.
There are timelines.
We see where we are.
Honorable members.
What I will do,
Mr.
Speaker, can I reserve so that I can get a clean copy? And then when we return, perhaps after the member for Cat Island would have finished his presentation, then I can elucidate or clarify certain things that the member is putting to this honorable house. But I am of the considered opinion that
honorable member, if what I would suggest from the chair is that you get a clean copy.
Yes, I
of
want
the
to confirm that he's leading this house.
And then we can have that document tabled.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Speaker, but before he sits there, Speaker, he's accusing me of misleading the House. Yes? Whoever, Speaker, I would like for the member to put on record before, because we're going to break now for lunch, I take it, put on the record how I am misleading the House at this time and what I've said so far.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is why...
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
That is why I said in a clear way that perhaps I should reserve my commentary so that the honorable member can complete. And because I have a document here that really speaks to how things
Can you summarize, to appease the member for Cat Island, what you intend to allude to later on in the report?
I refer to the government briefing report, which looked at the advent of the OECD requirement for mutually common assistance. It also refers to the Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, and it goes down and it gives a history of when these things first came about in '98. And when I gave my presentation, I spoke to it and the legislation that was passed by the Progressive Liberal Party to try and avert certain issues. The honorable member spoke to signing on to the bilateral agreement for assistance, and he attempted to assert the stance that they had complied with it, but that the international community was consistently moving the goalposts. What I suggest from this report is that certain requirements were put, and that by May of 2017, 2017, only one of 65 was signed. And then there was the introduction of the multilateral agreement, and how do we sign on to that? Just as we came into government, Mr. Pascal was in contact with the Attorney General to warn, to say to the Attorney General that these matters are serious. So you saw a series of legislation. As a matter of fact, the Minister administration had to quickly break from, and so when they say we have no plans, we had to break from legislative planning to address, just please, I'm explaining. He's saying that Mr. Speaker.
Just a moment, honorable member. The member for Cat Island yielded now. He apparently is back on his feet.
Mr. Speaker, I was attempting to find out what I asked, Mr. Speaker.
You asked for him to explain.
No, Mr. Speaker. I asked for him to put on the record how I misled the House.
Yeah.
And he has not done that. He's been giving a speech. And he's explaining.
And Mr. Pascal was saying, did you not serious?
Honorable member.
I'm not seeking to lay blame. The other assertion that was made is that we went on a break. It is conventional that you take a break. And after the hurricanes, the honorable leader traveled with my leader around the islands. And so all I'm saying is the chronologic, the series of events, and how it is being put, that there was some sense of urgency or commitment, that there's something to be said about it. That's all I'm saying. And I don't know whether or not he wants to address why only one of 65 of the agreements was signed. And I could read it.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe this is an ample spot for us to take our break and suspend for lunch until 3 p.m. So I do move at this time that the House of Assembly do suspend until 3 p.m. today.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House do suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. The business of the House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.